I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Board of Trustees for the Santa Barbara School Districts for Tuesday, November 14th, 2006. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise.
We will want to check. Do we have our? Oh, yes. Ms. Vivian Rodriguez is here and will be our interpreter for Spanish language.
Sí, buenas tardes y bienvenidos de parte de la Junta Directiva del Distrito Escolar de Santa Bárbara. Si hay alguien que necesite la ayuda de un intérprete, levante la mano para darle un audífono. Gracias.
Gracias. I'd also like to announce that we have headsets for the hearing impaired as denoted on our screen. Okay. We have no reportable actions from our closed session, so there's nothing to report out. And that brings us to item C5, acceptance of donations.
Move to approve, and there are some really large ones, but there were so many that we had to go to a really small font. So the community's been extremely generous with us. So move to approve with appreciation. Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. And once again, we extend our sincere appreciation to such a generous community. We are always appreciative. That brings us to item C6, introductions, proclamations, presentations, and or recognitions. And Dr. Sarvis will be making some of these.
There we go. Good evening, Board. We have two introductions tonight. The first is in regard to our diversity training that we conducted this summer through the National Council for Community and Justice. San Marcos AP, Roxana Stern, is here tonight. She will introduce a San Marcos High School student who participated in the NCCJ diversity training this summer. Roxana?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Roxana Stern, one of the assistant principals at San Marcos High School. We always like to share the good news about what's happening at our school sites. And actually, more than one student, we have three. They will keep their comments very brief, but they all wanted to be sure to be able to tell you what they did this summer and how their work is continuing throughout the school year. I also wanted to thank Jared Schwartz from NCCJ, who has come this evening to support the students. And it's through Mr. Schwartz's work and the others at NCCJ that our students have these opportunities. So if I can invite TJ Brown, Ty McKnight, and Esther Flores to come on up.
So is this how I spent my summer vacation?
Hi, I'm Esther, and this summer we went, along with other students from the Central Coast, down to Westmont to the NCCJ CLI camp, and we learned about all different types of like isms is what we call them, like racism, sexism, heterosexism, and what we can do in school to kind of stop that or help stop that, and they'll tell you more about it.
Basically, in the camp, first we started out in the beginning just getting to know a lot of each other. There was a very large group that we had, about 75 people, and we just got to know each other, doing like easy things that would slowly create friendships between each other, and we would learn about each other's lives and experiences that we had gone through. We basically had like a daily schedule that we went through every day, and we, like Esther had said before, we talked about certain things, including racism and sexism, and we also had groups called change agent groups, which were smaller, which were about 10 people or so, which we mostly talked about like things that we could do once we finished the camp and what we could start in our community that could help others and that we could do to slowly create some change in the community and with the rest of our people in our schools and our societies.
As TJ said before, we have all kinds of groups, and one of them was the dialogue groups, which he had mentioned. It consists of diverse and identity in school. It's all the people that came from our schools in that group, and our change agent group was different. We had people from different schools in different counties in those groups and talked about what we did during our large group discussions is when we talked about the main topic of the day, which would, for example, racism. And we had, after that, it was probably during the night we would do that, and we would meet up with all these group of people and just talk about it for about an hour and a half, about what we thought of it, how it affected us. And it was a great experience, and Esther would like to tell you how our San Marcos High School is going to try to keep this going.
So we have Speak Against Hate Club at school, and I know that Santa Barbara High and DP have something similar to it. And we just kind of try and raise awareness of it because a lot of us don't realize how present it is in our schools. And so we're raising awareness about it, and there's going to be a peace week, and each day will focus on one of the isms. And I think it's really important that you guys support things like CLI because it really does teach us a lot about the isms, and it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and I'd also like to thank Jared Schwartz for the work that you do in our community and with our district. Thank you.
Thank you, students. In a related vein, we have other activities that focus on diversity, specifically our Anti-Defamation League peer trainings. And I'm going to invite Veronica Rogers to come up. As she's coming up, let me say that understanding diversity is part of our district's mission, an important foundation for safe schools. We have a number of diversity-related activities going on in the district, and while Veronica Rogers comes forward, would somebody please bring her up here? I would like to share a little about some of the activities in the district. We have ADL peer training programs that are scheduled for December. And our secondary schools are preparing for Diversity and Social Awareness Week in February. This is in addition to a host of activities that take place throughout the year. Additionally, we are encouraging all of our students to participate in ADL's, that's the Anti-Defamation League's, No Place for Hate program. We've asked Goleta Valley Junior High School Principal Veronica Rogers to share briefly tonight the information about the junior high school peer training program that just took place at her school. Veronica.
Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. I'll try to be quicker next time. One of the things that I was pretty excited about this year, it takes 7 months, to believe it or not, to get 4 schools together, to really get together and start talking about what's important in our community. And one of the things we really wanted to work with, thanks to also Jackie Reed, who works with the Anti-Defamation League, was getting all 4 of our junior highs together in one room for a few days to really be talking about issues that nobody wants to talk about. And we managed that, and we're able to do that with 15 students from each of the 4 junior high schools. And the kids ended up working all day on a Friday, all day, and gave up a Saturday. And in the 2 days, our goal was really to get the kids thinking about issues. I'm so proud of you high school kids. Get them thinking about it early on so that by the time they get to high school, they can work on these issues, make a difference, and have some tools in which to connect. One of the things that the kids were working on was, first of all, defining what a leader looks like. And the leader isn't always the top of the class, the top in one area. It can be, there are many different forms of leadership, and so the kids worked on defining that. The other was really identifying the isms, and the students were looking at the untouchables, the words you don't say, the ouch words, and also being able to recognize what it is to be a bystander, what it is to be a bully, and what it is to be a victim, and being able to have some common terminology so that when they are confronted with it, they can do something about that. In each of the 4 schools, they are bringing it home in a different way, and our goal is to be able to get together later on in the year at different points and reconnect and see what's working, what isn't working, how can we get some more support. In past years, the ADL has had the high school kids trained who came to the junior highs, talked about and worked with the kids from the high school kids to the junior high. So I'd like to see a lot more of that teamwork happening, because our kids in junior high really look up to you kids so much. You make all the difference in the world. I think, first of all, being able to recognize, work on it, make some goals, to have a junior high school say, I have some biases. Now I want to work on them. I don't want to be a bystander. I want to stand up and do what's right. Those are huge words for an age group that isn't always so comfortable. So anyway, I'm really proud of what we're doing. Boy, if the kids were up here, you'd really have a lot to hear. So you'll be hearing from us in the future. We're real excited about the work we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. These sound exciting. I keep wanting to invite myself to some of these meetings.
Well, that was it for
Okay.
presentations tonight.
Okay.
Yes.
So now we can move on to the superintendent's report.
And congratulations in the recent board election to Bob Noel and to Kate Parker and their successful run for Board of Education. Yes. I might also note that Craig Price is out suppressing fires tonight. You probably saw his election results as well. The Franklin ribbon cutting this afternoon. Franklin Elementary School celebrated 3 newly constructed facilities, 12 beautiful new classrooms housed in 2 wings, plus a fine new library media center. It included a technology lab. It included a teacher work area. It included a reading room. It also included a small classroom, which could be used variously for special education, for tutoring students. This one will be used at Franklin very soon for their Waterford lab. There is so much excitement at this school. Their move-in date is November 17. That's this Friday. So it's coming right up, and we have thanks for the citizens of Santa Barbara. This $5.6 million project was funded in part by the $25 million in bond money through the I-98 elementary school bond and by our accessing state matching funds. We were able to parlay that $25 million for the elementary district into over $40 million for various construction projects across the elementary district. Well, the ribbon cutting was a successful event. The students sang, recited a poem, and they served as docents on the facilities tour. And a number of board members were present at that event. It was a touching event. We also have good news about a science grant. The elementary district's science grant with Carpinteria has been funded. Carpinteria is the lead agency, and we will work with them this spring to implement the grant. It doesn't really begin until next summer with an institute. However, we will have some teacher leaders working with Carpinteria this spring. It will be a voluntary professional development opportunity, and I will keep you informed as I get more details. Robin Sawaski received responses from several teachers who want to be a part of the teacher leader team, and it's not too late for others to apply. Have to get those in whenever we can. We do have other ongoing trainings. We just had a 3rd day of English language development training for elementary teachers And we'll have a fourth day of that ELD training, systematic English language development training, the first week in December. This is important because of the program improvement status of the elementary district, and that has a lot to do with the need for greater success with students who are English learners in the elementary district. So we're taking this on head on, and we expect to increase the achievement of English learners in our elementary district. I had reported to you earlier on the Save a Life training. We had our first training today at Adams School, and I understand from the fire department that that was very successful, and other schools are signing up with that training. The board brief. Generally, on the second and fourth Friday of each month, my office issues a report to the board called the board brief. This is a collection of articles and reports on school and district matters. A copy is on display in the reception area or can be obtained through my office. In the October 27 board brief, the board saw an article from McREL entitled School District Leadership, What Works? The Effect of Superintendent Leadership on Student Achievement. We commented on the article at a recent board meeting for single plan presentations, and since we did, I thought it would be useful to note the three things that affected student achievement most from the district office, and they were, now I know there isn't a lot of information in this brief statement, that district level leadership matters, that secondly, effective superintendents focus their time on creating goal-oriented districts, and of course third, that superintendent tenure is positively correlated with student achievement. Gee, you have to get those announcements in whenever you can. The single plan for student achievement, with the exception of Washington Elementary School, the elementary school's single plan for student achievements have taken place. Next up will be the junior high presentations on Friday, beginning at 8:30 Friday morning. Board, please note there's a change of location. This room was double booked, and we will have a music program in this room for a community academy that morning. We couldn't move that one. We did move the board meeting to a city location since we have a joint use MOU with the City Parks and Recreation Department. So we will be meeting at 8:30 and at the city's Casa Las Flores. That's the one that's across the street on the mountainside of Cabrillo, 323 East Cabrillo Boulevard. The building is in the middle of the block on the mountainside of the street, not the water side, close to the carousel. Parking is probably best found in the city parking lot on Garden Street, or it can be across Cabrillo. The high school single plan presentations will take place here in the boardroom on Tuesday, November 21st. That's next Tuesday, and we will be beginning at 4 o'clock. Other upcoming events. Goleta Valley Junior High will perform Got Broadway on November 30th. Santa Barbara Junior High's play this year is Holes, H-O-L-E-S. Performances are scheduled for this Friday and Saturday evening. And finally, I know you've read about this and even saw an alert on an email. San Marcos's high school marching band took the band sweepstakes award, the percussion sweepstakes award, first place color guard, and high visual performance at the 38 band Rampage Band Tournament in Valencia in late October. You can see the performance for free in the school stadium at 6 o'clock on December 5th. So that's in a couple of weeks' time. That's it for the superintendent's report tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Starvis. Okay, we will be having a student board member report tonight. We have a student board member report on the first meeting of each month, and tonight we have a student from Santa Barbara High School, Jackie Zupsik. Did I say it correctly?
Yes.
Zupsik. Okay.
Hi, my name is
Welcome.
Jackie Zupsik. I am filling in for our ASB president, Kelsey, who is actually playing tennis right now in the CIF quarterfinals for girls tennis in Newport. This week, the week of October 9th was the beginning of our homecoming week. On Friday the 13th, we had our homecoming parade again. It was a very big success. Over 200 students participated. Everyone on State Street seemed to enjoy it very much and came out to show their support for Santa Barbara High School. The Saturday was our dance. Our school also hosted a volleyball tournament that weekend in the gym, so we moved our dance outdoors. It was the first dance we've ever had outside, and the theme was Under the Stars, so it seemed appropriate. We sold over 850 tickets, and thank you, Dr. Sarvis, for stopping by. Club Rush also happened recently on our campus. Over 30 clubs came out to participate. This was also very successful. Lots of students were able to find a club that was perfectly fit for them. This year, our school has hosted the Civic Missions of Schools Conference. 50 students from Kern County came to our school, and we talked about the role of student leaders in our community. Also, Still Life with Iris, our fall production, opened last week and is also going to be playing this Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at our school at 7 o'clock. And so be sure to come and support the Dons. That is all. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We invite you to stay, but we certainly understand if you choose to leave early. We know you probably have school, work, and things that you need to attend to, so we thank you for being here tonight. Okay, that brings us to correspondence from the board.
I just want to note that last week, 4 of us here went to Oxnard High School to see the AVID program there, which was very exciting to go see what they're doing at Oxnard High School. There's so much to say about that, but we'll have to spend another time on that. I did want to note one thing. I don't know if it's appropriate right now, but that they were mentioning about their band, and I just want to sort of put this in there. Because they changed the title of their band to, do you remember this? Yeah, and so that they could get a UC credit for art. And I just want to put that little bug in. So that's a sort of an interesting idea. But the AVID was really exciting things going on, and we have a lot to learn from them. So it's good.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Do we have any, that brings us to public comment. Are there any public comments? I believe we have.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
I'm chatting. We do. Susie Coffin.
Good evening. I'm Susie Cawthon. I am the president of the San Marcos High School PTSA. And I'm going to talk fast because there's a little history here. We were meeting to give away some of the fabulous donations that come our way that we've already raised over $30,000 for school and classroom enhancement. And it came to our attention that we were, again, having some SIP funding return to our site issues. And I will give you a slight bit of history, but San Marcos 20 years ago, Bob Gray can really give you the full layout, which we had him do. But of the 3 schools, San Marcos was not a SIP-funded school for years. Our portion came out of the general fund. We were told last year that that might not happen as funds got tighter. And so our site saved some funds, tried to be very fiscally prudent, and we put off purchases, and we're told that, you save funds, year-end closes, they'll come back. At our last board meeting that we were at, I know Bob Wolf said, yes, those funds that were taken from the sites that I can only surmise were taken to show reserve adequacies at year-end, or I'm not really sure why, which we also would like to know. Those funds would be returned, particularly in our case, because our funding is always a little uncertain because we aren't a SIP funding, and our Title I was also a little bit uncertain. So we saved money, told it was come back, it didn't come back, and our administrator looked like he hadn't slept in a few nights when we had our meeting. And luckily, we were able to tell him that our PTSA is financially prudent and fiscally responsible, and we have saved a little bit for a rainy day. So if it comes March and you don't get these funds back, we will be able to buy toilet paper and copy paper to keep our campus going. But we would officially like to know what then district personnel came to our site council meeting, and after I had been at the board meeting and they said these funds are coming back, came and said, well, only part of those funds may come back, only your Title I categorical funding, but that leaves $69,000 that we saved to be prudent with our funds that we now, had counted on being in our budget this year that wouldn't be coming back. We need to address that portion, obviously. We would, personally, our PTSA, 980 members strong, would like an audit trail on when the funds left our site, what fund they went into at the district, and then has that been dispersed, and why cannot it not be returned to our site expeditiously? So hopefully this is my understanding of current events up to the date, but it is $69,000, and our PTSA is very concerned. We've had to hold off putting a large portion of the funds that we always get right into our classrooms on, with wonderful enhancements for the classrooms and for the teachers. We're a little bit on hold because we don't know if that funds are indeed coming back and when, and we would like to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cawthon.
I know it's our habit not to comment on public comments, but I do think this calls for a brief comment on the part of Jan Zettel, who recently met with the site council to explain finances.
Mr. Zettel?
Thank you. Just to inform you, Mr. Wolf and I were out to the school site council to explain exactly all of those things. We were able to identify multiple funds that would be coming to the site, to also explain that they certainly would never be without toilet paper and needed supplies. And Mr. Wolf was able to explain that, yes, indeed, these funds we would certainly attempt to be returning these. San Marcos High School had carry forward in almost all of its categoricals, carry forward in SIP, in restricted and unrestricted lottery. And I was able to point that out to their principal as we took a closer look at his budget. So it is not at all in any kind of dire straits. Actually, it's probably in great straits because they're going to get a discretionary block grant of well over $100,000 that's coming from the state, probably in January. But any questions regarding an audit trail, I'm sure that Mr. Wolf or Mr. Diaz would be glad to supply that.
Okay, thank you.
One of the reasons we don't respond is because responses beget responses, and it's not agendized. But I think this is a discussion that I would like to hear agendized, so we could ask Mr. Zettel some questions and get a better understanding of what's going on. I can't do that now because it's not on the agenda.
Correct.
Okay. Laura Baker.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Laura Baker. I'm a teacher at La Cumbre Junior High, and I'm here once again to put my 2 cents in on the idea of the Santa Barbara Community Academy move to La Cumbre, the proposal. Again, I said at the last board meeting, I'm concerned about the fact that we still keep talking about this as a conceptual stage, and the more I've thought about the meeting that happened on October 18th that was so top-heavy that I spoke about at the last meeting with Dr. Sarvis and Pat Saley and Jen Zettel and David Hutyoung and Joe Wilcox and Carl Mayrose, among some teachers and one board member and our principal and our PTA members, it really struck me that I don't think Joe Wilcox spent 2 hours of his time out of the goodness of his heart. I believe he would have to be compensated for those 2 hours. Where does that come from? If this is a conceptual stage, you've directed Pat Saley and Associates to flesh out the budget. Is this part of that budget? And if this turns out to be a situation that is not going to happen, where does that money come from? The other issue is Carl Mayrose. It's my understanding he gets paid out of Measure V funds. Measure V funds are a secondary project. Secondary money should not be going to this at all. So I'm concerned that things are happening right now in this conceptual phase before the next decision from the board to go further or stop or whatever it is going to be made. And I think that the elementary budget can't handle any extra expenditures that are going to that are happening or possibly happening. I don't know where this is coming from, where this money is coming from to pay these people, and it concerns me that there's 5,000 other kids besides the 420 that could benefit from this situation that could benefit from the money. I don't know if that made sense to you. There's another meeting similar to this with the same group of people, I believe, that will be happening in October to speak with the community academy parents, or teachers, excuse me. And I think they certainly have their right to have their say and to have that meeting. That's important for dialogue to happen. But again, my question would be, is that another 2 hours of time from these consultants? So are we paying consultants for this out of a budget that isn't really there yet? So stop the expenditures that are currently happening on a conceptual idea is what my point is. You know, Pat Saley's the only thing that's been directed by the board. The decision has been to flesh out the budget. I assume that her time and the other district employees are already paid for, right? So I'm just concerned about those. Also, once again, just, you know, this is a cost prohibitive idea. Look at the history that several years back, Santa Barbara Charter was possibly going to come to La Cumbre. It was long before I was at La Cumbre, but the teachers I work with said that actually ended up just coming to a screeching halt when they looked at the budget, that it was not feasible to do it. And I would think that construction costs are that much higher 8 years later that it's still not going to be able to happen. And we don't have an issue with the academy. We have the issue of an elementary school being placed on a secondary program or campus.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. Okay, that concludes public comment. That brings us to the consent agenda. Are there any items, and we're almost on time. Are there any items that board members wish to pull? I know that we do have one item that's going to be taken off.
Yes,
correct,
Ms. Cordero, we need to withdraw D17.
Okay. So item D17 will be withdrawn from the consent agenda. Are there any items that board members wish to pull?
Can I make two little corrections to the minutes that, I mean, they're really, really small, so that we can just throw them in there? A3, it says Spanish translation, just take out the was, and Mr. Locke's name is spelled wrong on September 12th, 2 of 7. That's it. Sure that that can be found.
Are we still on the consent agenda, or?
Yes, we are.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have some I'd like to pull.
Okay.
D2, D13, D14, D15, D23.
Move to approve with.
I'm sorry, could I just get those real quick again? D2, D14?
2, 13, 14, 15.
Okay.
23.
Okay. Ms. Malakoff? I'm sorry, Ms. Harder?
Yeah, move to approve the acceptance of those items.
Second. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries 5-0. For any members of the public, we will be returning to those items that have been pulled at the end of this meeting. Okay, that then brings us to our, that brings us to our action agenda. Item E1, approval of board resolution number 0506-14, resolution proclaiming November 13th through 19th, 2006 as California Retired Teachers Week. And I believe that we have a speaker on this item.
And this resolution is on for your approval. I also believe that at least one board member wanted to speak to this as well.
Okay.
Well, just a small little typo with the last bullet next to legislation. Let's take that off. And I'd like to add another whereas. Whereas retired teachers represent years of service to our district.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Whereas retired teachers represent years of service to our district.
Thank you.
Would that be in the form of a motion to this?
Sure. Except we have public comments, so we'll let the public comment and then take a motion. Are you ready?
Sure.
Frank Stevens, President of the Santa Barbara Division of the California Retired Teachers Association.
President Cordero, members of the board, Dr. Sarvis. My name is Frank Stevens, nowadays more commonly referred to as Ken Stevens' father, as it should be. I am here to thank you for the opportunity to have this resolution recognized by the school board. We're attempting to do this throughout the state of California. I represent a great group of citizens, as most of you are aware. We are especially proud of our volunteer work We have so many of our members volunteer in schools, through their churches, nonprofit organizations, and more recently, we have okayed their participation in nonpartisan political activities also, which has brought in a whole new group of volunteers. In this recognition, what I would like to do at this time is present a check to Robin Sawaski. And this is our thank you to the school board for recognizing Retired Teachers Week. It is the check that we would like to designate to the teachers of the AOK schools. Those are being Adams, Cleveland, Franklin, Harding, and McKinley. And we're asking that Robin, through your channels, distribute these equally to the teachers at each one of those schools for supplies and materials. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your generosity.
I just want to say, Mr. Stevens, you came as a thank you. Maybe we should have a resolution on more frequently. And you forgot father-in-law of Cammie Stevens.
Okay, board members, do we need to vote on adding the amendment, or can we just add it in and vote on the amended?
That's amended.
Yeah,
Okay.
great. So do you want to make a motion?
Yes, I've moved to approve this resolution with the amendment, whereas retired teachers represent years of service to our district, because we want to
Second.
honor them.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. We're very happy that the motion passes 5-0. And we extend our sincere appreciation to all of our retired teachers and you representing them, Mr. Stevens, for numerous years of service and numerous kinds of service to our district. Thank you. Okay. That brings us to item E2, second reading and adoption of the Wellness Policy Board, the Wellness Policy, Board Policy and Administrative Regulation 6142.8, Comprehensive Health Education.
The board policies regarding health education were first reviewed at the time of Mr. Zettel's presentation to the board on a series of wellness policy revisions. They're being returned to you tonight for your consideration. Mr. Zettel.
Thank you. Board, I'd like to begin by giving just a quick summary of the background of the development of this policy. You know that we had a committee formed from school staff, from folks that were working in the community in public health, in physical fitness areas, and in health education areas. We worked for a year. We had probably close to, I think it was either 9 or 10 different meetings. We split into subcommittees to work on each of the three areas, health education, nutrition, and physical education. We've passed the nutrition section, and I'm coming back to you with a few little recommendation changes in the health education. I've been able to review the health framework and to look at all the applicable education code sections regarding health and health teaching in schools. And my recommendation now, after working with our principals at the junior high level, which was where my concern was, is that I'm recommending offering at least 1/4 of health education at the 7th grade level. Whether that comes in the form of a 4-quarter wheel, being backed, or whether it's outside of the school day. It's something that our two junior high schools that were outside of this and had health taught during PE and science have agreed to do, and they're able to put that into their schedule. We've gone through the district chair, and she feels very confident about this and being able to get all of the framework themes taught during this. It'll be fast, but it will be taught in the 7th grade in this frame. Now, if they continue to choose to do the trimester, I'm more than happy with that. And also, I put another suggestion in. If our PE teachers that are currently credentialed in health wish to teach a semester of health / exercise / science of nutrition and back that with regular PE, I think that would be fine also. I went over some of the latest and greatest curriculum that the state is looking at, and some of that was one or two of the districts in California have done that. It looks like a fine curriculum to me. So if in the future we want to do that, I think that would be fine. The only other issue, and I feel like I'm backing off of this a little bit now, as I talked with our teachers. There was a recommendation to create a health department, and with stipends, et cetera, at each of the schools. And I think what I would like to recommend to you now is that we continue to have a health representative at our curriculum council meetings. We just don't have enough teachers for me to recommend a health department. For example, at Santa Barbara High, we have one health teacher, and that a department does not make. And so I'd like to continue with the way things are with a health representative at the curriculum council. And so I think the other pieces for you to be aware of, that we will be we will be reconvening again our wellness committee and continuing to do compliance monitoring work to see how we're doing with putting all of the pieces in place with nutrition, with health, and when we do pass the PE, looking at that. So that's where we're at. Questions?
Questions from board members? Ms. Malakoff, then Mrs. Harder.
I think the suggestions are terrific. I like the changes very much. I just have this question about the PE. It counts still as PE, even I know that there's a junior high requirement for PE, and it would still count even though they would be teaching the...
Yes. The health and science of nutrition would be a part of the instruction. Exercise would be the main component, and the components of health of the PE curriculum would have to be in place also.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Harder?
Yeah, perhaps I'm not tracking, but tell me the suggestion of 1/4 of health in an elective wheel or 1/3 health in an elective wheel would be occurring at all 4 junior high schools?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And that's the work that we did.
That's huge forward movement.
It's a huge
Yeah.
forward move in my mind, so
Okay.
I'm very thrilled by that.
Okay, thank you. And then a couple of other questions. One is, this is just peculiar to me. I would love to see a copy of the challenge test for high school.
I'd love to speak to that.
Okay.
Right now.
Okay.
I had some parents come to talk to me about the test. I worked with Davis, who brilliantly was able to do some item analysis on that test. We discovered that we're going to have to throw that test out. There were only, I probably shouldn't say, but okay, I guess I'll say it now. 35 out of 100 valid questions on that test. It was just not, it was not vetted correctly. Not one child passed it out of some 50 students that took it. And it will be going back to the drawing board, and we're going to do it again and
That was
do
why
it better.
I asked. I'd seen older iterations of it, and so thank you.
Perhaps
Yes.
we should
for
describe
addressing
what
that.
we mean by ballot items. This is not by Davis's opinion that that these are not valid. Yeah, these are actually technically not valid because in many cases the distractors invited more correct responses than the others, or the higher achieving students. The items didn't discriminate between higher achieving students and lower achieving students. And in any test construction, you simply throw items like that out. There may be good reasons for the editorial or side to propose questions like that. But if they don't discriminate well between high-achieving students and low-achieving students, then you throw that item out and you go to another item. You write new items that do have good validity.
Thank you. I'm glad I asked about that.
Thank you.
And then with regard to the policy itself, it would be on page 2 of the administrative regs, under number 7. It says exercise, rest, and posture. There's just a couple of things in here that are just seem so antiquated, and yet when you look through the attachment at the end of all the requirements of the Ed Code for health education,
Yes.
why would we list posture and not AIDS education or a million other things that they have listed? And ditto for the next item down, number 8, where they talk about sickle cell anemia and related genetic diseases. Are these artifacts of old policy that should be altered?
These are artifacts of old Ed Code given to
Okay.
us by CSBA, and we'll certainly speak to our colleagues regarding this very antiquated language.
Okay,
I
well
agree.
then, do we want to be voting on this tonight before we can, work out some of these bizarre little wrinkles?
I'd like to footnote that a little bit. These, after so many of these, there's a CF 6142.7, 5141.23, et cetera. Those are not Ed Code provisions, are they? Those are policy provisions in the California School Board Association's policy, recommended policy manual, are they? Aren't those citations?
I believe those are Ed Code citations. We'd have to
Those
check.
Ed Code numbers don't run like that. Ed Code numbers are 5 digits.
It's it's the coding system from CSBA.
It's CSBA.
And it would also relate to the coding system for our board policies.
Well, that
This is in the 5000 series.
Yeah, and that's what I.
You're right. You're
yeah,
right.
that's right, and that's what I.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, because when it cites those, does that mean that these are our policies? For example, on the first page of the actual policy, board policy, it says, such goals shall include but not be limited to goals for nutrition, education, and physical activity. CF 5030, student wellness. CF 6011, academic standards. CF 6142.1, sexual health and HIV/AIDS prevention. CF 6142.7. Does that mean that those are our adopted policies, or are those references to the CSBA publications that we may not have adopted?
I believe at this point, because we spent quite a bit of time a year ago going over board policy, working with the representative from CSBA, that these are policies that will be awaiting your approval. They are not your current policies, and I'm glad to take these out as citations if you feel that's more appropriate. But these will be.
I don't think it makes sense to cite something that's not a policy.
That's not been approved
Yeah,
yet. I understand that.
With all due respect to the CSBA, they're not our policies.
However, and I will have to double check, I do believe that these are statements out of Ed Code 51890. And I could go get the Ed Code, but I think it'd be more efficient for us to bring this back to you.
There's an appendix here that has some brief excerpts
And
from those Ed Code
51891.
provisions, and those were very helpful. And 51890 was one that I looked up, and
Yes.
that made sense. But some of these, it was confusing. The citations here were confusing.
Good.
Okay. I hope I explained that, though, to you. We still have some work to do on our 5,000s. It will be coming to you as a recommendation from staff, but it certainly is not current Santa Barbara board policy.
So, Dr. Sarvis, is it your recommendation that we bring this back?
That would be fine.
Okay.
Madam Chair, may I
Can we
continue?
talk more
Sure.
about it, though, before we do?
Yes.
Go, please, Mrs. Harder. I don't want.
Yes, Mrs. Harder is continuing.
Please.
Just a
Yeah,
couple
please.
quick items to finish up my comments. On the next page, it begins on that same page, healthy school environment. Item E, the bullets are not parallel. It starts with a verb, then goes to a noun, then goes to a noun. So just need a word change there.
Where are you?
Under item E,
Oh, it starts with the verb, yeah.
under healthy school environment, item E. It's the administrative regs.
Oh, yes.
It's just not,
Yeah, there's no A.
oh, you're right, there's no A. It starts with B. Okay,
We didn't like
Yeah,
A.
making full sentences would help this whole thing.
yeah,
Just making it read.
in general,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. That was it, those were my comments.
Yeah, this
Okay.
is right out of CSBA. Sorry.
Yes, Dr. Noel?
On the first page of the administrative regulation, content of instruction, the district's health education program, using the California Health Framework as a guide, shall include instruction in elementary, junior high school, and high schools to aid students in making decisions in matters of personal, family, and community health, including the following topics. And there's that 51890 Ed Code site, which I checked out, and yes, because I didn't like some of that language, but it's in the Ed Code, can't argue. However, I do have questions about, in general, following through all those points, I'm troubled with some of them being applicable to elementary students, or to 11 or 12-year-olds in junior high school. For example, the use of healthcare services and products. Now, the first thing that comes to my mind is there going to be any parental consultation in that loop before someone starts teaching about the youth, teaching 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds about the use of healthcare products? What products? What kind of standards do we have to make sure that there's some kind of appropriate criterion applied to what they will and will not teach about, and especially to little kids? I'm not just thinking about those things. I'm thinking about like steroids. Okay. I mean, you can.
That was what troubled me about the comments about posture, sickle cell anemia. When you look through
Yeah.
the actual Ed Code, it names steroids. It names,
Yeah.
various things
Yeah.
that seem much more current.
Well, does the Ed Code require us to teach those things to elementary school children?
The problem is that this applies to K through 12, and it doesn't differentiate which portions are directed to which students. So maybe it's worth sorting out a list.
Well,
That's
would these then be subject to a parental request to have their child excused for some of that instruction?
Last year, if you recall, you approved the Holt series, State Board of Ed approved health textbooks. Those textbooks are currently, I know, being used in the secondary, and I'm not certain about the elementary. Usually not time in elementary to do that.
But what it sounds like is that you and Robin would need to put your heads together and put together a list here under content of instruction that is a list that is grade appropriate and in the administrative regs, so that when future boards go back to look at our board policy, they would see that, for instance, AIDS education is not being directed at elementary school students.
So that I understand, if you would like us to take out perhaps CSBA's citations within policy and go back and look at like the K6 scope and sequence, what's being covered, and then what's being covered in 7.
It wouldn't have to be exhaustive, but it could also
Well, I
include
mean, just
language that is
bulleted.
directed toward, age-appropriate health education.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I'm back to that first one where it says sexual health. I'm not very prudish, but I certainly wouldn't want my 8 or 9-year-old kid to have much instruction in sexual health
Yeah,
without my knowing what it's about.
Yeah, it is.
If I can answer that, I think pretty clearly. We can put more language in here, but the very first line that talks about the framework, if you go to the framework, it's very specific by grade level, and it talks about the appropriate instruction within the grade levels. Interestingly enough, on our curriculum council meeting this Thursday, we're looking yet again at the elementary level health curriculum. We don't have an adopted health curriculum at this point. We have our research-based Too Good for Drugs program that, you know, meets all the requirements that we have, but we don't have an up-to-date health curriculum, and that's something that the teachers need, particularly at the 4th, 5th, and 6th grades, appropriate to the age. So the framework spells it out. It does say that here, but in listing these, it looks as if it's in all of the grade levels. It's not.
Well, if the framework's required, I have no problem with that.
Well,
If we have to do it, we have to do it. But I think that when you get to some of the ones where you could expect some objection from parents, then we need to have the flag in there that says you may waive your kid out of this.
Let me suggest that we bring the frameworks in, because in the middle of the page under administrative regulation, under the side heading content of instruction, it says the district's health education program, using the California Health Framework as a guide, shall include instruction in elementary, junior high, and high school to aid students in making decisions, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that information would be particularly useful to this discussion.
Yeah, I agree. I actually had a couple of other questions that were not really so much into the content. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Zettel, because I'm a little confused about your recommendations. Can I ask it, what impact would your recommendations for 7th and 8th grade have on electives, other electives that students may take? And I understand the wheel idea, I guess, enough to understand that broadens the range of possibilities for students. But I also thought I understood that it means that there are breaks, so that it's not really appropriate, for example, for foreign language instruction. And so I guess I want to know, because I hear from parents that are already concerned that for their kid to take foreign language instruction in junior high school, they have to forego electives. What is the impact of this health change on that?
Well, I think that's what we reached as a basic compromise, I guess you could say, by having, by recommending at least 1 quarter and not having to have a trimester or a semester. I was recommending a semester at junior high, and that would have really affected the electives. We get a lot of criticism from the high schools who say that 12 weeks is certainly not enough in a music elective or an art elective. And I don't know what we do about that. Honestly, if we had a 7th period day, we could add more. We could have semester long. But I think the real point of electives in junior high is to give students a taste of all of these things so that they would have a better choice to make in high school. I don't know that I agree with farm team, is what the electives are for high schools.
But that's only one philosophy of what electives are about, is a sampling or a taste.
Yes.
A taster. I mean, another
It is
approach
one
is that
philosophy.
electives have to do with cumulative skill development, like in foreign language or like in music.
Absolutely.
And I agree with you. I hear it all the time that the high schools feel that the feeder programs in music, the ones I hear about, are decimated, and their enrollments in the music program are going down, and they wonder whether they're even going to have a critical mass to put together a band, and that's why what motivates my questions. What the impact of requiring more health is on these in these areas.
When I talk to the principals, they're not concerned about losing electives. I think that's the compromise that we reached.
Wow.
In the 2 junior highs that had no health in the master schedule.
Well, that's good to get on record. The public can hear that the principals are not concerned about losing electives.
Well, I think that's a little bit different discussion, Dr. Noel, and it's a critical discussion, but it's between the rock and the hard place, trying to offer as many electives as possible and being mandated by the state to offer health education.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you want to bring it back as a future agenda item, I think it would be a good discussion.
Yeah. I just have one more.
I also just want to say, I'm not sure it's an entirely fair characterization that the principals are not concerned about losing electives. I think what I understood you to say is that the principals are not concerned that how this policy will affect the electives because of our mandate to offer health education.
Thank you, Mrs.
Okay.
Cordero. That's exactly right.
I just don't want
They
our.
would
I don't-
certainly like 8 periods in their day so they could offer full electives. They are concerned about the number of electives, but in this context, they're not concerned that they will have to cut electives by offering 1/4 of health.
Good. I just don't want our hardworking principals to have to take flack for something they didn't even say.
Matter of fact, at 2 junior highs, they could, if they wanted, increase the amount of electives they're doing right now, given this new policy.
How?
How? Didn't you?
Seventh
It's-
period, you mean zero
no,
period? Or?
No, this says that it has to be a quarter of a semester. Right now, it's a third of a semester, so it's actually reducing the amount
So
of
what-
time. For
and-
2 of the junior highs, at La Colina and what's the other one?
And the foreign language students?
And Santa Barbara Junior. It's
Doesn't-
7th grade. At 8th grade, it doesn't.
Yeah.
They would have the
Doesn't
they would
affect,
have
it does not affect the
it would-
foreign language students or the music students?
It doesn't change it any. It doesn't change it any.
My last question has to do with over here on, the pages aren't numbered, so. Administrative Regulation 1 to the 3rd page of the Administrative Regulation. And it talks about healthy school environment. That's the heading. And it talks about issues that require district school implementation plans include but are not limited to, A is missing. E says resource centers for health and nutrition information on each campus. Reasonable site funding should be assured. My questions have to do with money. In the AR as written, I don't see many things that are going to cost money, but that looks like one of them. In the recommendation from the committee, I saw a lot of things, and I was glad to hear you talking about the departments and so on. Departments cost money, but what kind of money are we talking about here, and where's it going to come from, and especially in the elementary schools?
I think what is meant by this is I was able to look over some of the federal recommendations for the new wellness policies. They're looking at citing all of the information on nutrition and health and PE in a central area, which might be the health office in a junior or a senior high school. It might be nutrition information can be garnered in a cafeteria area. I think that the point of this is that students ought to be able to access information regarding their own health, information about that they're learning about in their health courses, and also nutrition information in the food that they're eating. And
I was asking about the money.
I don't see it costing
Yeah, if I recall the
anything.
discussion from the Wellness Committee, it was essentially trying to create as many opportunities as possible for students and families to gather information about nutrition, physical activity, and health education. And it was simply to use already existing space, like the health office or like a little corner of the cafeteria, to make pamphlets and other materials that are already available from the state and from the county of Santa Barbara and other child health related organizations that the schools receive anyway.
Yeah. Would it then hurt this administrative regulation to delete the phrase reasonable site funding should be assured?
Wouldn't matter at all.
I would be happier with it. Last thing, I see down here the exemption from health instruction, and that's what I was referring to, and it is here, and I appreciate that, but it refers to exemptions that conflict with religious beliefs, training, and so on. And again, back to the question of these children of tender years, that has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with training and beliefs of that kind. It just has to do with parents' sense of when their child should be exposed to certain information. So I would hope that that waiver language could be broadened to include that.
But wouldn't that be included under including personal moral convictions?
Oh. Not to me, not as I understand moral discourse, no. It's not a moral question, it's a question of timing.
At the grade levels, it wouldn't, something that's not appropriate for that grade level, that's detailed in the framework, wouldn't be presented to kids in elementary school. So at that point, if it was something that a parent wanted to have a waiver for or opt out, it would be something that would be a personal, maybe moral conviction, but it would be the extreme, the outlier.
Okay, are there any other comments from any other board members? Okay, thank you. I think we've given you a lot of feedback on that, as we always do on this item.
Thank you.
I'd like to see
Okay.
I'd like to see the frameworks on rest.
Item E3, board action on student expulsion case numbers 0506-105, 0607-03, 0607-05, 0607-07, and 0607-14.
Okay, it drives me nuts that on the agenda and on the sheet, they're in a different order, but I'll go with the order that's on our summary sheet. In the case of 0506-105, move to approve the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
In the case of 0607-14, move to approve the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel with the exception that the homeschool principal be offered the opportunity to reconsider his exception or exemption at the appropriate juncture in time. Does that make sense to you, Mr. Gonzalez? Okay.
I'm sorry, to reconsider the exemption?
Or exception.
The exception?
At the appropriate juncture in time. In other words, at the conclusion of the term of the expulsion. Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Second. Sorry. I was just going to comment on this. I'd actually like to see a letter of explanation from the homeschool principal as to why he made the exception in the first place.
But that's not going to change our decision-making. If we were delaying decision-making, that would be helpful. So why would we require that now?
Well, I'm just saying, I'm not suggesting that it change our action, but I would like to get an explanation. It doesn't have to be part of the motion, but I would like us to have an explanation of why the principal chose to do that.
Okay. Did you second?
Yes,
Ms.
we have
Rucker,
a motion seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries 5-0.
In the case of 0607-07, move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Second.
Okay. Now this is when we're the recommendation is different from the one we just voted on, although the offense seems somewhat less serious. We're imposing a harsher penalty. I'm wondering if we might want to.
You can vote no.
Well, I know, but I'm wondering, as far as the motion goes, if we want to entertain any consideration to.
Has the motion been seconded?
Yes.
Yes. If we want to entertain any consideration to make the punishments more similar Hearing none, we'll vote on the motion. Okay? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? No. Okay, motion carries 3-0-2. Okay,
In the case of 0607-03, move to approve the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Second.
okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries 5-0.
In the case of 0607-05, move to approve the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, that brings us to our conference agenda. Item F1, approval of Cesar Chavez Dual Language Immersion Charter Schools Memorandum of Understanding, Appendix A, Special Education Services, Appendix B, Assessment Plan, Appendix C, Administrative Services, and Appendix D, Facility Use Agreement.
This is an update on all the MOUs with Cesar Chavez School. Mr. Gonzalez will describe the changes we anticipate. We've been working with Cesar Chavez. As the board knows, we approved the charter for Cesar Chavez about a year ago. Is that correct? Yes. And that charter runs through 2009. What is it, 10? Oh, it was 2 years ago? Oh my gosh, how time flies. That's right, that is right. Good.
Thank you very much. There are 4 documents that are attached to this item. The first item is the Memo of Understanding, which reflects the fiscal and administrative responsibilities agreements between the district and the charter school. I will share with you that most of the revisions concerning the Memorandum of Understanding have to do with cleaning up language to be in compliance with current charter school regulations and our own administrative regulations regarding charter schools. I will share with you that perhaps the main addition to this agreement has to do with the fact that if you take a look at page 10 of 13, under Roman numeral 12, Evaluation of Educational Programs in Conformance to Charter, if you take a look at item E, where it says instruction, you may recall that the Williams settlement was something that a charter school could voluntarily choose to opt in or opt out. We made a decision in our district that we're going to obligate all of our schools to make sure that they use State Board of Education approved or Santa Barbara Board of Education approved materials. Cesar Chavez has agreed that that's an appropriate addition to their Memorandum of Understanding. And so that's item E. I will also share with you, just to reiterate, item D. Very clearly, charter school law requires that a charter school meet the requirements of No Child Left Behind. And in just a couple of minutes, we'll put a overhead that very succinctly explains what that item is about. The rest of the additions to the Memorandum of Understanding, we're just cleaning up language. So it's not, what I've just covered with you is the most significant portion, addition that was done with the MOU. The attachments A outlines special education services, and there is no changes in that appendix. Appendix B is an assessment plan, and that was reviewed by district staff and approved. There is no substantial changes to that plan. Appendix C, Administrative Services, again, the language that was placed was simply to clean up existing omissions and bring it up to date. The other significant change you will find is in Appendix D, and by significant change, I mean that very clearly at this time we are limiting the potential growth of Cesar Chavez to 300 students, and we have indicated that an increase beyond that number is a function of the facilities master plan. There are two corrections that I want to bring to your attention. Somewhere along the line, we've listed the address as 1102 Yanornali, and we need to correct that to read properly 1102 East Yanornali. So we'll make that correction. And then again, as was previously mentioned, the life of the Memorandum for Understanding and these attachments is until October 12th, 2009. Of course, very clearly, the district as well as the charter school has the option of sitting down at any appropriate time and seeking revisions to these documents. Let me show you. There was a previous conversation about the current requirements for renewing a charter, and I just want to very quickly point out to you that Education Code 47607 outlined effective January 1st, 2005, 5 parameters that a charter school would need to meet in order to have their charter renewed. And I'm very pleased to report to you that Cesar Chavez indeed did meet one of the 5 standards. Charter schools are expected, number one, to attain the school's academic performance index growth target. And as a matter of fact, that's the provision that Cesar Chavez met. The second one is an API decile ranking of 4 or better. The third criteria is an API similar schools decile ranking of 4 or better. Number 4, documented evidence that the charter school students are performing at least equal to that of the students in schools of the district that the students would otherwise be attending. And finally, 5, if the school qualifies for participation in an alternative accountability system model. And again, Cesar Chavez did meet the first criteria of meeting their growth target this past year. We have together for you folks, we have the principal of Cesar Chavez as well as 3 representatives from their governing council who would like to address you and answer any of your questions. I would also share with you that this MOU and its 4 appendices were brought to the Cesar Chavez Governing Board, and they did approve these documents. Now it is staff's recommendation that our board approve the documents as well. Thank you. Questions?
I'd like to offer
Dr. Sarvis?
further information. I'd like to remind the board, first of all, that in our meeting on facilities master plan, we directed that the campus not be split, which would require that we go above the 200 student maximum that we had previously shown on this document. This 300 student maximum would allow 40 students per grade level in grades K, 1, 2, and 3, and would allow 27 students per grade level 4 through 6. That would bring the school up to a total of 295 students. And if a couple more students were added in 4 through 6, it would top out at 300. I also recall that there were questions raised about the assessment plan, and I want to highlight differences in this assessment plan versus the assessments that all schools have to do. Eva, maybe you want to address that.
Okay, I'll do that. And if it's all right, I'd like to just say a few words, please.
Sure.
That it was back in 2004 when the school charter was renewed, and that had been my first year as a principal. I'm happy to be now returning my 3rd year as principal, and our teaching staff have all returned for a 3rd year in a row. We have an active governing council with 11 members at this point in time. As you look at approving this MOU agreement, I just would like to thank the district staff and the board for the support that we have felt as a school family to work hard and uphold on our end this agreement, which is what our charter and our MOU is, an agreement to offer what we believe is an innovative program for public school children. We would like to continue this supportive relationship, and we're working very hard to meet those goals and the mission of the original founders of the school to implement our two-way immersion program so that it provides a path for academic achievement for all students, whether they start out as dominant in English or dominant speakers of Spanish, leading them all to become bilingual, biliterate members of this community. So the school is in its 7th year, and we continue with some of the same focuses we've had since the year 2000 when the school opened, such as a strong parent involvement component. I'd like to recognize our Governance Council President, Maria Salome Lopez, who is a parent, and our Governance Council Treasurer, Jeanette Hope, also a parent, and our School Site Council President, Carol Millar, who has 2 children at our school. We continue to be a school with a small staff, even though we've grown, and so we're able to have our teaching staff collaborate with our support staff, and we continue to focus on professional development, staff development. Some of the new things we are doing under the recommendation of our outside evaluator include focusing even more closely on our English learners, on them achieving proficiency in English. We are looking at tightening up and articulating our English language development curriculum and how it interweaves with the regular English language arts curriculum, as well as the Spanish language development for the second language Spanish speakers. I would like to now respond to the differences. Dr. Sarvis had asked about the assessment plan. So what is different?
Actually, Dr. Hayden may have an overhead of that. Do
Okay.
you? No? No. Okay.
So it's Appendix B.
It's just your eyesight.
The assessments that are given to Cesar Chavez Charter School students that are likewise given across the district and state would be for English learners upon enrollment, and then annually thereafter the CELT, which is the California English Language Development Test listed there. The pre-loss is an assessment given in Spanish for those English learners so that we see their incoming level in their first language, and that again is something that's done across the state for initially identified English learners. Our students also participate in the STAR testing 2nd grade through 6th grade, and the STAR component includes the English testing of the California Standards Test, the mandated testing in Spanish for English learners with less than 12 years, but we also do an optional STAR component of testing all of our students from English-only families or students who are fluent English proficient, testing them on the Spanish standardized assessment. In past years, it's been the SABE 2, the Aprenda, and I understand that there is now a California Standards Test in Spanish that will be given this spring to English learners in the lower grades. So that's the same throughout the state. The Oral J we give in kindergarten 3 times a year, which I believe is the same for kindergarten throughout the district. So that gives us a way of comparing our students when they start off into immersion with how other students start off in the district. At 1st grade, we are giving the Oral J only at the end of the year as kind of a post score, having had it at the end of kindergarten and the end of 1st grade. What is new, grades 1 through 6 from the previous MOU, is this assessment listed up there as DRA, and that's the Developmental Reading Assessment. This is an assessment that's done one-on-one, where a teacher takes a reading sample, listening for fluency, accuracy, and a comprehension check with the older grade students, 4 and up, or maybe 3 and up, I forget. But there's also a written component where they make their predictions and they respond to comprehension questions in writing. So the DRA it's a nationally known reading assessment. We use the Solemn, and that's a measure of oral language. That's the Oh, the code is at the bottom. Student Oral Language Observation Matrix. And so that is one where the teacher doesn't use any class time for assessment, but rather after getting to know the students, they sit back and rate them. They can reflectively score the student in the areas of vocabulary, fluency, pronunciation, other things just related to oral language in both Spanish and English. So that's one that we're using in every grade level. And the final assessment listed there, which is in addition, since I came aboard as principal, is that we have the teachers administer a standard writing prompt in the fall and the spring in every grade level. We're actually using prompts that were originally created by the San Diego County Office of Education, scoring on the 4-point rubric that is a rubric used throughout the state. Do you have any questions on assessment or anything in general?
Board members? No? No?
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, that brings us then back to the overall MOU. Mr. Gonzalez, did you have anything else to add, or?
No. We're prepared to answer your questions, and again, staff's recommendation is that we approve these MOU and the attachments, the appendices A through D.
Okay,
Now, I had a question for Mr. Gonzalez at your convenience.
okay. Dr. Service, you had a,
We have this on the conference agenda, and I see we have it under the title Approval of, which is in error. And the board knows that it can approve items on the conference agenda, or it can ask that they come back to the action agenda at the next meeting for approval. So it's really up to the board.
okay.
You had a
Dr.
list,
Dr. Noel?
you showed the education code and a list of criteria. Could you put that back up? I'm trying to understand whether you have to, these are criteria for the board to revoke? Could you explain just what these are and how,
Sure.
particularly, you said that they only attained one of them. Now, and implicit in the way you presented it was that that's sufficient. But I couldn't find in the quick glance at the language that it said, any one of the following. Did I miss something?
I would direct your attention to the third line, and after that comma, it says, a charter school's charter may not be renewed unless specific performance standards have been met. Next line, among the performance standards that may be used to satisfy this requirement, and then it outlines the 5. At this point, Cesar Chavez did meet the first criteria or requirement. They did they did attain their growth target. This is, again, strictly out of the education code. We have not modified our charter school board policy or administrative regulations to specify that it's got to be more than one of the requirements. At the present time, meeting one of the requirements would obligate the board on that basis to...
Where does it say that? Especially the word obligate.
The Education Code 46607 is a large document. I simply summarized it for you here, but you would find a full reading of 47607 would say that if it had not met one of these 5 requirements, then the board could not renew the charter. Again, we can provide in a board brief or at the next board meeting the full reading of 47607.
As I recall, with the State Board of Education's cleanup language, no, actually this is legislative cleanup language in the Ed Code that sets as a requirement that a charter school meet one of these criteria for renewal. that we pulled that into our board policy a couple of years ago. I believe we put that language in place, and it was about 2.5 years ago, although I'm a little fuzzy on these timelines. October 2004 was just yesterday. So this is really straight out of the Ed Code. The Ed Code says that a school must meet one of these 5 criteria, and my recollection is that we adopted that language directly into our board policy.
Well, that's the difference.
Sure.
Syntactically, a school must meet one of the 5, okay, but it doesn't say that the board cannot require in addition. And that's what I read up there, that,
And that's-
that I read that it's, that we could apply all 4 or all 5.
But that's what I'm saying,
When-
that at the time that this board considered that, we adopted that language. You must meet one. We didn't say.
1 was sufficient?
Yes, we didn't say, okay, well, let's make it 2 or let's make it
Okay.
3.
Well, that's what I'm asking. 1 is
Yes.
sufficient.
Yes.
1 is sufficient
Robin
according
says-
to our own board policy.
Okay, gotcha.
And we have that written into this MOU on page 2, the bottom of page 2, under letter E, stating that the charter school shall meet at least one of the following criteria prior to receiving a charter renewal.
Bottom of page 2.
E, page 2. It's the first memorandum of understanding.
Okay, well, that clarifies that, because that, to me, that wasn't
Yes.
self-evident.
Actually, I wanted to ask a question or make a comment about the same section, not about what you have up there, but what's down in E, where it says shall meet at least one of the following criteria. And as Mr. Gonzalez indicated, Cesar Chavez met E1 for this year. It doesn't provide any language for what happens during the term of the MOU and the charter if the criteria are not met. Now, granted, we gather for single plan reviews, but clearly when you reach October of 2009, the board at that point in time can use this to either renew or not renew, depending on whether at least one of the criteria have met. But I would be very comfortable having some safeguards in place, some checks in place, so that you know and we know whether this is being met in the intervening years, so that we don't suddenly get to October 2009 and have a board say to you, there's no way we're renewing your charter because you haven't met these criteria. Now, I don't know whether it needs to be articulated in the MOU or set up in some different way. I just don't want there to be any surprises on either side. I want the school to be well informed as to whether or not they're meeting these criteria. I want the board to be well informed. So as I said, when October of 2009 rolls around, we're not all caught off guard and in a very unpleasant situation.
I wouldn't see any surprises coming, because when I mentioned about the supportive working relationship, part of that support is at the instructional and the managerial type end of things, with the support I receive as a principal from the assistant superintendent and the superintendent. For example, that our school met our API, but we did not meet the adequate yearly progress. So I've had meetings with Robin, with Brian, with Davis, looking at test scores, as have principals who are non-charter principals. So the communication is in place with district staff. As far as for district staff communicating to the board about what's happening, that would be the part I would defer.
Yeah, let me take on that issue as well. I can certainly understand that if the school did not meet any of these criteria this next year, 2007, did not meet any the following year, 2008, yet the following year, 2009, met one of the criteria, then it would be a wait-and-see game for that 1 year. And perhaps to judge on 1 year and 1 year only is an inadequate way to judge. I would entertain the notion of sitting down with the school and negotiating some multiple year requirement so that it would not be a surprise.
Apropos of that, an E1, could you tell us, did you meet, it says met your growth target in the prior year or in 2 of the last 3. Which was it? Did you meet your growth target in this past year?
For 2006, yes. For 2005, no.
Okay.
And for 2004, I believe it was a yes.
Okay.
But I was new then, so that's why I'm not sure.
And the other ones, did you succeed in all of those, or Mr. Gonzalez only pointed out one? I think the public should understand.
For API E1, yes, for the year 2006 testing window, we did achieve that target. For E2, no, we are not in that ranking. We have never had a score for E3 because our school population is so small that there was not a similar school that they would compare us to with a small sample size, so that has never applied. It will begin applying from now on. And E4 would be, of course, up to the district to decide if we're comparable in or providing an adequate education other than to be judged by test scores. And E5, we haven't explored that.
So you would be compared to Franklin and E4?
Yes, that would be the most obvious school. Same neighborhood, similar
How do you
population.
look compared to Franklin?
How do we look at this point? Our test scores, our API are not as high as Franklin's at this point.
And you need to make how big of an increase in performance to reach the annual yearly progress next year?
For the adequate yearly progress, shooting for the target of, I think it's still 24.4, around 25%. In English language arts, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. I was trying to go off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I'm just seeing API on this one. I can tell you that in math, we were very close to the target of having students proficient, or as a school, our students score relatively higher in math, but in English language arts, we were still quite a few percentage points off, especially for the subgroup of English learners, and that's why I mentioned our focus on that subgroup.
Is that the one, I don't remember the specifics from your presentation in the single plan, but
yes,
there was one number that was a long, long way from meeting the requirement for No Child Left Behind. Is that
yes,
cool? Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
we did talk about that.
So some of us might not be surprised to find you becoming a sanctioned program improvement school next year.
Some of you would not be surprised, and some of you may be very pleasantly surprised to see growth because as the bulk of our student body is now moving into 3rd grade, and so those previous year's students who were tested, it was a very small group, those who are currently in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. The students who have had the benefit of a fully implemented 2A immersion program are now in 3rd grade, and another big group in 2nd grade. So they're at the beginning years of testing and being able to watch them with test scores. So that's why we do anticipate growth in those test scores.
Well, I surely hope you make it next year and stay off that list.
Thank you. And one other thought as far as for the communication, it is spelled out in the MOU that one of the things that we provide to the district is a programmatic audit. I was flipping for the page and I didn't see it, but where we talk about the assessments, the academics, staff qualifications, and various things are spelled out there. So that is part of the ongoing, are you doing well or you're not doing well as a charter school.
Okay. Okay. Ms. Malikoff?
I know how you like to have students go all the way through your program because it is a progressive program that goes through from kindergarten on up. So I'm curious as to how you'd move up to get it. You have now a little over 200 students, and you're hoping, I guess, to move toward 300. And I'm just asking whether that's going to be a gradual process by because if you did it all at once, you're going to end up.
Yes, it's gradual. Spring of 2004, when I first came, the school had 102 students, and then the next year we were up around 150, and then last year around 190 something. Now we're over 200. So the growth is, it follows from bringing in 40 students every year in kindergarten as they're moving up into the upper grades. Previously, the first year it opened, they only had 40, and they didn't always bring in 2 full kindergarten classes. So it will continue to be gradual over the next 3 years until we would max out just under 300.
So it's just adding 2 more kindergartens each time. Is the
and maintaining the other students up through the grade levels.
We've had people come in and public public comments, and we occasionally, we've already said we wanted you to stay at Franklin in terms of that was part of the facilities master plan and so forth. And I just want you, and what we get is people who say, oh, but they should move someplace else. And I want it from you. You want to stay at Franklin.
Yes, we can't imagine actually moving our whole school. I'm sure any school would have difficulty fathoming that. But it's been workable, and we think with a long-term plan it would be even better.
Sounds good. In terms of the charter, it's probably a pretty broad question. Maybe it's just something to think about. Is there any reason why you wouldn't want to be a charter in the future?
Kind of an unusual question. Any reason? I think that would be a question I'd like to ask one of our parents if they don't mind to respond to. The differences that I know, having come from a traditional public school, now being in a charter, is we definitely have parents who are expected to be leaders, who have a bigger voice than I've seen in non-charter schools. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I would ask, would one of you join me up here? Any thoughts? They didn't know they were going to be asked to speak. I just
maybe they just want to think about it. I don't mean to put you on the spot here.
Good evening. I have two daughters. One is 15 right now. And with her, I got as involved as I am with my younger one. However, I didn't feel the same warmness with, I don't know if it's just the size of the school or for it to be a charter school. I feel so welcome every single time I want to walk into not just my daughter, I'm sorry, I have a call, my daughter's classroom, but any classroom, because all the teachers know me. They pretty much know every parent. And every time we walked into a classroom, we feel welcome. In fact, it seems like when we come in, they grabbed us and, oh, we need this, can you help us in that? And for some reason, with my other daughter, I didn't feel the same thing. With my oldest daughter, I try because I've been very determined that my daughters are completely literate in Spanish. My first daughter, I had her in bilingual when the school board at that time decided to take out the bilingual. And now she's not literate in Spanish. She has trouble. With the younger one, I've been kind of hesitant because I didn't get to try with the other one to see if it will actually work. And when she was in first grade, they told me that she was ready to be transferred to English speaker. And I said, no, I would rather you leaving her there. But I was still kind of hesitant. And this past year, she was in second grade. It was her first time testing for the state testing, and I was kind of nervous to see her score. She came out proficient in English and advanced in math. And that's why I'm so glad, and I'm putting everything and as much time as I can into and I see that's the difference. Even though I got involved in the other school, it wasn't the same thing. I don't know if it might just be the size of the school, that it's a lot smaller and everybody knows each other. But I do see a difference between a regular school and this one. That's all.
Thank you so much for your comments. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Noel?
Go ahead. Were you going to make some comments?
No.
Can wait. Oh. I just had one last question here, mostly for you, Dr. Sarvis. It talks about here on page 1 of 10, Appendix G, the facility capacity for the charter school in 2006-07 is 300. The long-term facilities needs to accommodate charter school growth to a maximum enrollment of 300 will be addressed in the facilities master plan. And we made a decision about the master plan about not splitting the campuses, and I'm just wondering how what implications those have for one another.
Well, that is the decision. I mean, that's what.
Okay, that means.
What we've seen in the facilities master plan so far is a preliminary draft, and in the final facilities master plan, that's what will be shown.
Oh, and it could go beyond the 300 that's in this MOU then?
I don't anticipate, no, this is an
The MOU
that would limit
is
it.
binding, and it's a
Yes.
contract, right?
Yes,
Okay, so they've got a 300 cap for the life of this MOU.
yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
No, I want to be
Dr.
clear.
Sarvis?
Do you want us to pursue additional discussions about the language for the renewal criteria here?
I do.
I'm
just one voice.
Other board members, are you ready to make a motion on this, or?
I would actually prefer to see it a second time, which is not to say that you would need to return, but if there was someone who was expecting seeing it on the conference agenda who might come back the next time to comment.
Yeah, I actually think that it's, I would have less concern about that since it's identified as approval. And I would imagine someone who wanted to address it would probably have understood that they could address it tonight. But if we don't have any desire to make a motion, we can move on.
I'll make a motion to approve, but I'm not sure I'm going to get a second here.
Has it got a second?
Just a minute. I'll second it. I just want to double check that I could second. Okay. Okay.
I move to amend. I'd like to postpone it to the next meeting. I'm moving to postpone.
Is that, I don't think, is that an amendment? That sounds like a that sounds like an alternate motion.
Well, all right, a substitute motion. I move to postpone to the next meeting. Pardon me for not labeling it properly.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. So we now have a substitute motion on the floor. We vote on the substitute motion. All those in favor of postponing the vote until our next meeting, say.
Excuse me, before you take a vote, just to clarify, I think that there's two motions on the floor at this time.
Yes, there are. We have the main motion and the substitute motion.
Okay.
And we're voting on the substitute motion first.
Okay.
Okay. So we have the substitute motion is to delay the vote until next meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? No. Okay. Substitute motion carries 3-2. It makes the primary motion moot. So we, if you don't mind, we will withdraw that motion. Okay. And the MOU will be agendized for our next meeting, and
That's good. We'll put this on next meeting's agenda. I didn't hear any board direction to reconsider that language on renewal options.
Okay. Okay. So that will have us move on then, and thank you very much for your time and efforts in being here. And we will look forward to discussing this at our next meeting. Okay. Okay, that brings us to a break. We will take a 15-minute break, and we will set the timer and be back in 15 minutes. Turn to our conference agenda. Item F2, report on financial direction of the elementary district and proposed fiscal evaluation. And Dr. Sarvis will be introducing this topic to us.
Well, this is something we've had a number of discussions on already. We had the first discussion at the time that we set board focus goals. The fiscal health of the elementary district is of particular ongoing concern to us. Let me emphasize that we are not now in a budget crisis in the elementary district. In fact, the problem is that we do have a balanced budget and it doesn't provide us a lot of extra money. Not very much extra money at all. And in the future, we'll be looking at paying our GASB 45 obligations for retiree benefits. That will put further pressure on the elementary budget. So I'd like to review a number of the elements with you that we've already talked about as part of the plan for board focus goals. I'd like to provide you with updates in a couple of these areas. Of particular importance, I believe, is the basic aid projection. I'm going to ask Bob Wolf to come forward to talk to you about that. So I'll tick down these lists that are shown on the cover memo, and toward the end then I will introduce to you for his first board appearance, Ed Diaz. And I've been talking to Ed from the time that we started interviewing Ed Diaz about what he would do to look at the fiscal future of the elementary district, what elements he would analyze, and Ed has some ideas that he already has down on paper that he'd like to review with you. So,
I
yes.
just want to thank you for introducing Ed. I have been remiss all night, and I even have a little note to myself. I was supposed to do it when we came back from the break, and I apologize that I did not introduce you and acknowledge the fact that we have a new face on our dais up here, and we want to welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I might add that he already knows how to use that clock. Well, the first attachment shows the plan for board focus goals, and there are a number of elements, beginning with the feasibility analysis of the Tatum and Hidden Valley property. That's a major element that will contribute to the fiscal health of our district, or that could contribute to it. Now, that's an ongoing discussion. We will be bringing that back to the board this next meeting when we have the final report from UNIDEV that provides the information on the feasibility study. Then you'll see the other elements that are shown here. Among them, attendance was a primary concern. I'll be commenting on some of the others because I tried to pull all of these elements into the list in my memo. And then when Ed and I met, we tried to pull all of those elements into his overall format so that he'd really be considering elements of a fiscal solvency study. So I'd like with that to go back to the cover memo. Under revenue, and let me just talk about revenue for a moment. We'd asked Bob Wolf for an update on our basic aid projection. And you will see that on attachment B. And Bob, I'd like you to come up to the microphone because I'd like you to lead the board through this. Let me just say that according to this projection, if we cap the number of enrollees at our 3 charter schools, Peabody, Santa Barbara Charter, and Cesar Chavez, that we may be just 6 years out. Now, saying that we're 6 years out from qualifying as a basic aid status district really means 4 years, 8 years. I mean, it's hard to predict because it's based on certain assumptions about property tax increases and assumptions about decreases in the student enrollment in our district. So while Bob's setting up, let me just point out the columns. The first column that you'll see on this attachment is the district ADA, and this is the district ADA within the district absent the charter schools. And you'll see the funded BRL. Bob, what's BRL?
Base revenue limit.
There we go, thank you. Base revenue limit. And the revenue limit is the leveling up amount, well, I'm sorry, it's the amount from the state that this last year, 2005-06, was $4,912 per elementary student, and this year is $5,286 per elementary student. Now, by contrast, please recall that at the secondary level, it's about $1,000 more per student, which answers in large part the question as to why the fiscal health of the secondary district is much better than the elementary district.
Maybe I should just go.
The third column then shows the revenue limit total for the district. And you see in the next column the estimated property tax. Now, the estimated property tax increase is important to this equation because as that increases, at some point, there is enough money available in property taxes so that there's no leveling up formula from the state, and a district can live by means, by the old means, which is really the origin of the term basic aid. That's how districts used to be funded, simply by property taxes. And Serrano versus Priest, some 30 years ago, I believe it was, changed
72.
that. Pardon?
72.
72. My gosh. More than 30.
Yeah.
Well, I was just a kid then. The next column shows the loss to the charter schools, the loss of revenue to the charter schools. The next column, the property tax available for district use and the difference between the two. In the last column, you will see that at some point, the difference between the revenue limit and the tax available, in that these two lines cross each other, starts to add money through simply property tax to the district. And wouldn't it be nice if we crossed that threshold and if each year we were able to add another $1.5 to $2.5 million to the elementary budget simply due to increases in property tax and continued enrollment declines, which we don't have very much control over. We don't have very much control over the property tax either. However, there is a point, when Bob finishes this discussion, I want to add in the element of transfer students, because we have well over 300 transfer students into the elementary district, and we just watched another school district go through this process where they were close enough to qualifying as a basic aid district that they decided to stop bringing in new transfer students, both kindergarten students and siblings of students who are already in the district, and bring down then the number of transfers over something like a 3-4 year period. And I don't have an update from Jerry Fawcett in the Hope District yet, but I remember last spring they were thinking that they'd be about 3 or 4 years out from being basic aid. I believe they dropped more students than they expected to. So I will get you an update, and I'll provide that in the board brief. Well, Bob, I ran everyone through the chart. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. No. One of the difficulties of this is obviously there's a number of variable factors involved here. One is your ADA, what is it going to do? Two is what's the base revenue limit going to be, and what are the projected COLAs out over time? And then what are your property taxes doing? Now, with a cap on the charter school enrollment, that sort of helps slightly, because that will obviously help with it says loss to the charter schools, and essentially currently it's not a loss to the charter schools because you're a revenue limit district. And as a revenue limit district, the state backfills all of that money. So if you give up $4 million, the state gives you $4 million back. So it's not really a loss. However, when you get to the basic aid status, and let me see if on this chart if I can, yeah, I don't know that it will work. Basically, what would happen is that if your revenue limit was $25 million and you had $26 million in property tax, that means that you would be a basic aid district and you get to keep $1 million. However, with the charter schools thrown in there, if you give up $4 million, the state's only going to backfill to the 25. They're not going to backfill to the 26. So essentially, you do have a loss at that point, which is probably why some of the basic aid districts in the South Coast area here don't have charter schools. So this chart is basically my best guess or wild guess to try to juggle all of those factors and to try to give you a point as to when I think you're going to do it. I've done calculations on another sheet, and it's come out to 2013, 2014. So probably somewhere in that time frame or time range, depending on what's your enrollment do? I mean, we could take a nosedive in ADA down to, you know, if you lose 500 kids all of a sudden, that's going to obviously make an impact. On the property tax side of the house, you can see the property tax values are dropping, or the sales values are dropping here in Santa Barbara, or the housing market slowing down slightly. But the property tax values will go up anywhere from 1% to 2%, because that's what Proposition 13 allows the county assessor to do. I tried to get them to give me an estimate of property taxes, and they don't do that. They do it about, they do it about 1 year ahead, so I was sort of on my own past that time. So do you have any questions?
Really some questions for Dr. Sarvis, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mrs. Harder?
Could we, would it be easy, I know it's possible, but would it be easy to get some kind of sense of where the transfer students fall? Are they mostly in K through 3? Are they mostly in 4 through 6? So that we could get some sense whether it's bottom heavy or top heavy, or just you know, distributed through the entire.
We certainly can. We have counts of transfer students. In fact, Robin brought those to me that show just school by school. They don't show the different grade levels, but we can break those out by grade levels. By the way, I will put those charts in the board brief this week so that you have those charts. Absent in those charts are some of the charter schools, and we'll be going back to the charter schools and getting information from them, because one of the things we wanted to see was not just the number of students from outside the district transferring in, but the number of students transferring school to school within our district. And we thought that was not germane to this discussion, but of great interest to us in terms of which schools contribute students in their attendance areas to other schools. But we do have the transfer forms, and we can go through that count.
Okay, and then
I think Robin's writing it down right
Just
now.
to interject, in last year you had 300.
That's a lot of students. My other, it's not a question, more by way of request. Because we have so many basic aid schools in our neck of the woods, they actually have a network of, they've formed a network of basic aid schools, a support group, I don't know.
You're right.
And I wonder, Dr. Sarvis, if you could be in touch with them. I think it would be really useful for us to find out what kinds of activities they engage in, but also what kinds of activities they engaged in before they went basic aid. For instance, what Hope is going through, what Goleta went through. See if there's anything that we could do to help speed up, you know, a schedule like this. And also School Services has resources for
basic aid,
and also lobbyists in Sacramento for basic aid as well.
Oh, that's right. You know, these districts are always insecure about their basic aid status, and they do lobby heavily. I have talked to Dick Douglas, superintendent at Montecito Union. He told me I could sit at the wannabe table with Jerry Fawcett, and that I was welcome to sit in on their meetings.
I find it ironic that we're so concerned about declining enrollment, and then we're also talking about hurrying it up so that we can reach basic aid sooner. So we finally reached that place where decline can actually
this is the quandary that Hope was in.
So we want to export more students and import fewer students. Is that? Let me ask you this though: doesn't it get worse before it gets better? Mr. Wolf says there were 363 students being imported. At $4,500 a student, that's $1.6 million about. So if we were to start a program of phasing out incoming transfers, we would lose revenue limit funds until we reached the magic number and went basic aid.
Certainly.
So I would like to see that factored into any kind of long-term, any kind of projection curves.
Especially if we were to hurry this along for those few years before we hit that threshold, it certainly wouldn't help. And just hitting that threshold by $1 or $2 per student wouldn't help. And it's not until we're 1.5 million over that
Yeah.
that it really does some serious good.
So there's going to be like a period about 2 or 3 years before and 2 or 3 years after that you would feel it in a negative way.
Well, 2 or 3 years before.
Before, certainly, yeah.
When we'd have to make continued cuts, we'd have an enrollment, if we did hurry it along by stopping future transfers, well, or, in the Hope District, they considered a number of options. One was simply not to allow kindergarten students in, but to allow students to continue who are already within the district, and in that option to allow students who were siblings of those to continue. They decided not to go with that option. They decided not to let kindergarten students in as transfers, nor to let siblings of students they already had in their district in. And their enrollment drop was something like 128 students in our district.
Yes, I think it dropped quite a bit. In fact, interestingly enough, when you see the data that is going to be in the board brief, it used to be almost a wash between the number of students we got in and the number that went out. This year, the number going out is significantly less. I want to say it's under 200. I
Yes.
don't
Out-
remember.
out of our district.
Yes.
Quite a
So
change.
we have quite a few, almost double well, not quite, but close to double the amount coming in now than those going out.
So
That
we're
happened
getting-
in 1 year.
We're getting more revenue limit money from them.
Absolutely.
But making the
Yes.
basic aid more distant.
Yes.
Yes. Well, so these are the hard decisions that we'll be faced with. And I would rather consider them 5 years in advance than consider them, just a year or two in advance and soften that blow.
Just a quick question is, do we have jurisdiction over transfers to the charter schools?
Transfers to the charter schools. Well, we have MOUs with the charter schools, and
They
we
would-
know who the charter schools serve. We set caps with the charter schools. We're about to sit down with Peabody School, and we've had discussions about what sorts of caps we might set with Peabody School.
I don't know if anybody paid that close of attention in the single plan for Peabody, but they've grown since 1999 from 624 students to 750 students. And some of them may be, I don't know, maybe transfers from out of the district, but I'm certain that a number of them are our elementary students as well. So I think we need to take a look there.
I recalled that about a third of those students were transfer students, and was that just a flippant remark, or was that?
We were wondering if the data in the master facilities plan draft was correct, but it looked like 450 students last year, which was a lower number, wasn't it 450 were from their attendance area. Pat Saley wasn't quite sure if that was exactly accurate, because some of the numbers didn't add up at the end correctly, but there's a significant number that don't come from their attendance area.
Well, if you were to consider, for example, 300 students, and by stopping the transfer of some 300 students, now we're currently at 360, you might back this up, and you can see in the first column that it decreases by about 80 students per year. What's the number there, Bob? Well, about 80. So if you were to back that up 3 years, well, or 4 years, we may be very close to being basic aid if we were to make changes soon. This is the kind of thing that I think should be included as an element of the study of the fiscal future of the elementary district.
I agree.
And with that, I'd like to go on.
Can I ask
Yes.
Mr. Wolf one question? He used a term with reference to the charter schools about state backfilling, and I guess I didn't understand that entirely.
When you're a revenue limit district, It's just that the state sets a revenue limit that you can earn for the unrestricted side of the house. And so in our particular case, in the elementary school district this year, let's see, it's about $29 million. Now, of that $29 million, some of it is local money, which is the property tax money, and the rest of it to get to that $29 million is state aid. And so in this particular year, we have about $24.5 million coming into us as property tax. $4 million of that goes out to the elementary or to the charter schools. So now you're down to $20 million in local monies that stays in the district, so the state gives you $9 million in state aid to get you to the $29 million or the revenue limit. So that's what I mean by backfill. So if the property tax to the charter schools increased to $10 million, for example, and we started at 24, we give 10 away. We're now at $14 million. The state gives us $15 million to get back up to the $29 million. That's what I meant by backfill.
Thank you.
The second bullet that you'll see on the list in the cover memo is the impact of interdistrict transfers on basic aid status, and we just discussed that. Thank you, Bob. The third bullet is the Hidden Valley property options. As the board certainly knows, we're considering 4 options, and I included in attachment C out of the feasibility analysis draft report a brief chart showing those 4 options: to sell the property as is, to sell the property fully entitled, to develop workforce housing project, or develop market rate housing on the property. I know that one of the comments going into the final study was a comment about the number of proposed residential units. And I believe that Unidev at the time was using some 48 units and was using additional credit for affordability to bring it up to 56 units. And I understand that the actual number of units is closer to 57 units with additional credit, which would bring the number up even higher. Nevertheless, and you'll get that information at our next meeting. Nevertheless, you see the figures in the second column, which are anywhere from 7.3 million to 15 million, based on some short-term disposition value to the district. And you'll see the figures in the next column, which range up to $20 million over the life of the project. And that would be based upon either the workforce housing project or the market rate housing project being based on a ground lease, and that ground lease increasing at some interval indexed to some factor that had to do with cost of living or housing. So when the district originally took on this issue, it was an issue about bringing additional funds to the district through the use of that property. And as the district considers these options, we've had discussions about the first 2 options, making money available for capital improvements. The second 2 options, making money available for any needs the district had, which could include the general fund. And you will hear more information on that. I've asked Craig Price to get a very secure ruling on the appropriateness of use of funds generated from workforce housing on ground lease property and market rate housing on ground lease property for the general fund or any other purposes designated by the board.
So the market rate housing is referring to a land lease?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Both of these last 2 options are
So
referring to
in either
land
of
lease.
those 2 options could generate a revenue stream that could go into the unrestricted general fund.
That could go into the general
The first
fund.
2 options are subject to the...
Our sale, yes.
Yeah, and that money cannot be used for...
That money would go into capital
It's
improvements.
only for capital improvements.
Yes.
And what happened to that thing where we had to make it available to other agencies? We got a waiver on that?
We have a NAILR Act
It's
exemption.
about to expire, oh. So if we put it up for
Well-
sale, they,
Well, the expiration.
Yeah.
The expiration is on the Tatum property.
Oh.
And we're asking for an extension of that.
yeah. And whom do we ask for that?
The State Department of Education.
Okay, okay.
So we will continue this discussion as part of our study. And by the way, I will be asking you for times for a workshop on this. I know in the presentation from UNIDEV at our next board meeting that there really won't be time for lengthy discussion. We're likely to have a number of comments from the public, which is fine. But I will be asking you for additional workshop time so that we can sit down and have discussions about those four options or any mix of those options. The next bullet then has to do with maximizing attendance. And we all know that that the district receives state money based not upon enrollment, but on the number of students in the seat. And that is referred to as average daily attendance, or ADA, and attendance matters. Let's see. Bob, I used to have on the top of my head how much it mattered, and I see on your attachment, I see on Ed's attachment that every 1% increase. So if we're at 95% attendance and we squeak it up to 96% attendance, every 1% increase in the elementary district is worth about $220,000. That's serious money. And all of our personnel, teachers, support staff, everyone should consider this a serious issue, not only from the standpoint of whether students are in school and ready to learn, but also from the standpoint of fiscal solvency.
Dr. Sarvis, I actually don't have that piece in my.
Oh.
It's okay. You know what? I don't need to see it.
Actually, it was on the top of attachment E.
Okay, thank you. It doesn't matter. Okay. My question really had to do with, because increasing attendance falls directly on the school sites. I can't increase attendance at school A, B, or
Yes.
C. I personally can't do it. I would love to try and create some kind of incentive program where obviously we reap a financial benefit as an entire district, but also where some percentage of those funds that are recouped are offered to the school sites who succeed in increasing their attendance. So that they can, as a staff, make certain purchases or whatever it happens to be, whatever form it takes, much like, the governor's performance awards from years past. But I do think that the sites should reap some direct benefit because they're the ones putting the muscle into this.
Yes. As a matter of fact, we had discussed that as part of the part of revenue enhancement in the board focus goals, and Ed's taking notes on that. We'll have further discussion about that when we get to his part a little bit later. Thank you.
Well, I was going to
Yes.
say, we have had that discussion a number of times about trying to create some incentive, because I really think this issue of reducing our absentee rate
Yes.
is one of the best ways to try to improve our financial picture, because
And achievement.
Exactly, I was going to say,
Yes.
because it promotes student achievement and learning at the same time that it's creating additional dollars for the district. So it's really a win-win situation, and it's something that we do have some, albeit maybe limited, but some control over. And we can really do things to try to help this, and we can implement it. We can implement these approaches relatively quickly. We can start doing things immediately to try to improve attendance. So I just think we should be doing as much as we can, as quickly as we can on this particular issue. Because some of the other things that we might want to do to increase our revenue are sort of long-term projects. This one, I think we could accomplish, you know,
On a very short
on a very
term.
short, yeah,
Yes.
in a very short term. So I just would like to see us do this as quickly as possible and follow up on what Mrs. Harder was saying about creating an incentive for the schools.
Okay, Ed, mark that one fast track. Well, in fact, the board did hear from elementary principals. A number of principals have done a number of things to recognize students who have perfect attendance for the month, have assemblies, they have charts on the wall, recognition certificates. I mean, there are a number of things in place already.
Yeah, it seems like as a district, we may want to use those same approaches to recognize schools that are doing something.
Yes.
Because I think that the principals are obviously acknowledging that positive rewards encourage the behavior. So certainly I think we could follow their lead and perhaps institute some rewards for them as well.
I think we see they see a competition coming, and you know we try to de-emphasize competitions, but
No, I agree.
It's Skinnerian thinking.
that's right. But they're taking it on. Yes. Rental of facilities. In other districts, when they have closed a school or when they have room for another program, they may consider rental of facilities to a program as something that may bring in some $250,000. And this is what Goleta had told me when they rented a school they had closed to another school. I have had 4 very serious inquiries from private schools, 2 private schools, from a university very near to us, and from a city college very near to us, about the possibility of rental of facilities. Now, all of those inquiries were leading off of declining enrollment, and they had read into that gosh, you're going to have a school freed up very soon, so we want to rent that school. And they were serious to the point of wanting to follow up on what we could get done in a very, very quick way. And I've held them at bay because of our facilities master plan and because our enrollment decline really affected us throughout the district. And at one school, we had 1 classroom freed up by it just 2 years ago. At another school, we had 2 classrooms freed up. In another school, we had another classroom freed up. So the decline didn't just hit one school area. Well, we are at the point where we do have a couple of schools, and I'll be talking about the possibility of reducing costs for small schools or the possibility of closing schools, because any district that has declining enrollment can not go on until you're at the point where you only have 200 students in a school and then think, oh my gosh, we should have closed that school a long time ago. I mean, that's a little late to be considering it. So, rental of facilities may affect schools where we have additional capacity. Most of them have asked about schools like La Cumbre School, thinking that if La Cumbre School only has some 480 students or goes up to 600 students, there would still be a number of spaces available on that campus to be rented. Medi-Cal administrative activities reimbursement. This is something you hear referred to as MA for Medi-Cal reimbursement activities. And frankly, MA saved us last year in our budget. We were able to show reimbursement through Medi-Cal at a fairly high level. Bob, would you like to speak to the levels that we received this last year? I will say, though, that reimbursement is not immediate. It comes rolling around months and months later, and all of the enthusiasm that we have from staff members wanes in the interim because the money doesn't roll in. So there's another area that an incentive program may be very appropriate.
The first effort that we had was the first quarter of 2004-2005. Everybody was involved. Everybody got, turned in their time sheets and everything. We just received that payment of $415,000. The last quarter of 2004-2005 that we're still waiting for is about $104,000. So it's gone way down because of participation by the teachers in the districts and the administrators in the districts went way down. And I just got the first quarter of 04-05 is only $54,000. So it dropped like a stone. People haven't been participating, haven't been turning in their time cards. So that's where you're going. And so, when you start talking about incentives, that's fine, but you have to have the money available first before you can do the incentives. And it does take anywhere from 15 to 18 months to get a check out of the Department of Health Services at the federal level that comes through Kern County. And right now, the Department of Health Services is trying to stop paying that altogether. And so there's a big push on by local education agencies that receive that money to provide services to the children who are basically uninsured, to have that funding remain going. And so it's a battle in Washington right now as to whether that funding is even going to be available.
For that reason, since that money is in jeopardy in the long term, you will not see it in future budgets. But you will see that it did significantly improve our budget picture this last year. And that was thanks to staff who were participating in it. Well, that's another area that, as long as it's alive, can be maximized in some way. Reducing costs. Let me move on from revenue to costs. An obvious area in the cost equation is that of the efficiency of small schools or closing a small school. You have an attachment D, and I'll reiterate that any district with declining enrollment has to be looking at the costs incurred in smaller schools. Let me just run down this chart with you. You see a standard cost for an administrator. We have at our elementary schools an elementary principal in place. And we have the same full-time principal in place, whether it's a school of 370 students or 400 students or 500 or 550 students. That's the same cost. Classified support. I averaged the classified support for our two smallest schools. Our two smallest schools are now Cleveland and McKinley. And the population decrease at McKinley has been serious in this past year. Overall, the classified support that we pay as a fixed cost at those schools is $250,000. This includes an elementary school office coordinator, that's one FTE, and we provide one FTE whether it's a school of 400 or 500 students. Maybe that should be on a ratio. We provide an elementary school office assistant. Our standard is 0.75. We provide that across the district. We provide a school health assistant. Again, our standard is 0.75, whether there are 400 students or 550 students. Library techs. We do provide differential levels of library tech support. 0.5 at smaller schools and 0.75 at larger schools. We provide a head custodian at every school. And in addition to the head custodian, we provide night custodian support, 0.75 at a smaller school and 1 FTE at a larger school. In addition, we have costs that are relatively fixed at those schools. When we close a classroom, or when we do not fill a classroom with students, we leave that door unlocked and leave keys in the hands of the principal, and the school makes darn good use of those classrooms. So I don't want to denigrate their activities here, but those classrooms do have fixed utilities costs. We pay for gas, electricity, water, waste. Average between those two schools, Cleveland and McKinley School, we pay some $64,000 a year at a school, at a small school. We also pay for telephone, copier, that's copier maintenance. It's not a copier and separate maintenance, of some $20,000. So the fixed costs at these elementary schools are $454,000. That's serious money. Let me just propose two options on this chart. One is that if we were simply to put those on a ratio basis and we were to assign partial positions rather than full-time positions, and say, now this is hypothetical, but say we could save 25% of those costs in each of these areas, then we could save some $30,000 in administrator salary benefits, some $62,000 in classified support, some $16,000 in gas, electricity, water, waste, and some $5,000 in telephone and copier maintenance, which would total $113,000. Now, that's an appropriate amount of money, I believe, to be able to save in a smaller school. And in a moment, I'm going to ask Bob to talk to you about the relative expense of educating a student in our different schools. And it's in part influenced by these kinds of costs where we have full FTEs in place rather than ratioed positions. And I believe I've said before that many of us would prefer to have students attending smaller schools, attending schools of only 350 students. But if we cannot do that as efficiently, cost-wise, as schools of 500 students, then we are eventually going to be in trouble as all of our schools get smaller.
Just one quick and
Yes.
very small observation. When you're talking about a school health assistant and establishing a standard,
Yes.
I really think you'd probably have to look at the percentage of medically fragile children on their campus or those kinds of considerations before you assign their, because it could be a small school with a large percentage of students with daily
Yes.
health needs.
In fact, the same is true in a number of these areas. Just as an example, in a typical custodian ratio, just the fact that there are fewer students there might make the job easier, but you have the same square footage to clean if all of those spaces are used. So in a formula like that, you may have the number of classroom workstations, you may have the square footage in the school, the number of students in the school, and all of those formulaed together so that you can come up with some appropriate formula for that. You may do the same thing in terms of administrators and administrator salary and benefits. You know, at our Title I and lower socioeconomic schools, we end up with a lot more categorical programs and a lot of additional program support at those schools. Well, I remember myself, and Robin could probably address this, that with all those programs going on, sometimes it felt like I was doing everything but the core program. I was attending to all of our partnerships as a principal. I was attending to our Title I program, our Title III program, our school improvement program, and I didn't really have very much time left for basic instruction. So I had to really set that as a priority to make sure that I was highly attentive to what things are going on in the core program for all students. I mean, there might be some sort of a ratio based on not just the number of students at the school, but extra programs as well at the school. Well, let me move to the last column. If we were to close a school of this size, and I'm thinking of the smaller schools here, we would probably still have fixed expenses. We would probably still have some custodial maintenance expenses. We would still have some utility expenses. We would probably even have some telephone expenses and probably not copier maintenance. So that one's probably a little higher. But I ran through each of these and I simply assigned estimates as to what we would probably save For administrator salary and benefits, probably the whole $120,000. We would probably not add that to another school if we could assign these students to schools that would not seriously impact the size of the other schools. And of course, that's the caveat there. Classified support. In some cases, we would have to maintain classified support, for instance, custodial maintenance at the school, and we would probably have to increase the support at the schools, the adjacent schools where these students were now attending, where the remaining 300 students, say, were attending. So we might actually increase the office assistant time at another school, might actually increase school health assistant, maybe library tech, maybe night custodian at another school. So I estimated, and this is only an estimate, it's very rough, some savings of some $185,000 in classified support. Utilities, I estimated a savings of some $30,000 and $10,000 for a total of some $345,000. Now, let me say, before we jump on that and say, well, now we know we can save $350,000 by closing a school. In every other district around us that has closed a school, they have estimated something much closer to $250,000. Goleta found that they were saving about $250,000. Carpinteria was estimating about $250,000. Actually, they had a smaller school, and it wasn't even that. And Hope was estimating that they would be saving about $250,000. Now, that's on the cost saving side. The other advantage in closing a school is that it makes it available for lease or rental to another facility. So these other districts that I talk to generally consider savings of about $250,000 for closing a school and about another $250,000 for leasing it out to someone else. Now, with that, Bob, are you ready to talk about relative costs of educating students?
Can I ask you a quick
Yes.
question? I think this must be simple, and when I was looking at this, I kept feeling like I was missing it. Why would we save the entire administrator salary and benefits when it's likely that person would still have to be working in the district and we would still be paying their salary?
We would reduce that position. It'd be a reduction in force, just like we reduce teachers when we don't have enough students.
Okay, so we would actually, it would result in actually losing some positions.
Yes.
Okay.
And just like teachers, we would hope to lose that position through attrition.
Okay, we looked at what we're spending right now on schools or at the school compared to their annual ADA attendance, which is what the SARC looks at. So you'll see these figures again. Cleveland, for example, our OAS is one of the smallest schools that we have. They're spending about $6,800 per student, per ADA. The next school on the list with the highest amount is Cleveland, another small school, about $6,400. $6,400. Adams, $6,200. Franklin's about $6,100. Harding's about $5,800. Now, a lot of that, when you look at those discrepancies, you say, well, why is that? Well, some of it's the age of the staff. Some of it's the amount of restricted dollars that one school is getting over another. So there's a lot of different factors involved with that. But essentially, as we look at what we're spending per ADA on an annual basis, the smallest schools are the most expensive schools, which is pretty much what you get.
Is it also dependent on attendance figures? I mean, OAS has the highest absent rates.
Right. And I did look at, I will tell you that I did look at the year-round schools, Cleveland and the Academy, when they came back to school on October the 9th. The first day, the first day at the Academy, grades 4 to 6, they had almost a 10% absence rate on that Monday. Cleveland had almost an 8%. So it was extremely high on the first day. The next days they caught up and it went down. But unfortunately, that loss is lost forever. You don't get that back. So, it's a small school. Those are both community-involved schools, very small schools, very close to the community ties, but they didn't get back on Monday when they knew the school was starting after the intercession. And this is a problem that you have. You're going to have the problem where if you fully fund a principal or you fully fund staff, then you're going to have that problem where you're spending a lot of money, because you do have a staff that's an older staff, a more experienced staff, so they're higher on the salary schedule. You don't have a lot of young teachers in your mix.
I have a quick
Can't
question.
get to that button fast
No,
enough.
no,
can
no.
you?
I have a quick question for Mr. Wolf, and I don't know if you can generalize this, but when you look at the charts of absenteeism is obviously closely associated with breaks. So high absenteeism right after winter break, right after spring break. Over the course of a school year at a year-round school, they have many more breaks than you have in a traditional school year. So do they have high absenteeism at the start of school after every single break?
I don't know. This was the first year I actually looked at the intercession. Normally, for the year-round school, their first 10 days, which is in July, we take their first 10 days when everybody else starts up. And then because this discussion came up about small schools and changing the calendar and having a single calendar start date, things like that, I just thought I would look at the first 10 days, them coming back off of their first break, which I was sort of surprised that after, it's their intercession or their summer school, so they had kids in summer school or they had kids in the intercession during that time frame. So it wasn't as though they didn't know that the school was starting back up. I was actually really surprised at the nose count that was that high at both of those schools.
You gave us the most expensive schools. Do you want to keep going down the list?
Do I want to keep going down the list? If I can get my stomach off of my button and go back. Let's see, Adams. Roosevelt's probably the most cost-effective and the cheapest. That's $5,317. Washington's about $5,761. And neither one of those schools have a lot of categorical title monies.
Yeah, I need to emphasize that. And I know that Bob said it, but this also has the amount of restricted money included in the school. So if you have a lot more Title I dollars and a lot more EIA, Title III dollars, then you're going to be higher on the list just because of that, among other factors.
Yeah, for example, in the case of Roosevelt, they get about $865 in restricted monies out of that total. And if you looked at Cleveland, they get about $1,400. So like I said, there's a lot of factors involved in why there's different amounts of money involved.
I suppose one way to do it would be to simply take out the restricted money, show it without restricted, and it would probably be about the same picture, although the absolute differences would be different.
Well, yeah, OAS is about $5,400 if you want to look at that, which that makes them again the highest. Cleveland's at $5,010. Adams is at $5,853. Franklin's at $45.97. Harding $46.92. McKinley $49.07. Monroe $46.28. Roosevelt's $44.52. Washington $47.14. And the Academy's at $48.32 for the unrestricted monies being spent, yeah, without any categorical monies involved.
Could we see that in the brief also?
Yeah, you'll see it in a brief. You'll also see it in the form of the SART, because these are part of the comparisons that are required for that.
Okay, may I go on? I was clicking down the list of reducing costs. We've looked at reducing costs for small schools or eventually closing small schools. The next two items are items that we've discussed before. One is special education encroachment. When I think about major expenses to the district, this is an area that any district has to consider. a major study of our special education expenses, our ratios in special education, the ratios, for instance, of psychologists or staffing at each site, and comparisons with other programs across the state, whether we're over-identifying students, just as an example, can add up to millions very quickly. And as we know, special education is underfunded by the federal government and has been for years now. Pardon? Yeah. Now, I don't want to cast any aspersion on our view of our students with disabilities. We want to provide needed services for those students. We don't want to provide inadequate services. We want to appropriately identify those students, but this is all part of the study as to whether they are appropriately identified and whether they do receive services on an appropriate ratio.
I had a question about something in appendix number 10 about special ed, and it had to do with the specificity of IEPs. Instead of specifying ranges, particular service,
yes,
2 to 3 times a week for 30 to 50 minutes, that it say 2 times a week for 40 minutes, for instance. And I wondered if that was an institutionalized practice or whether ranges were still being used in IEPs. I realize it's not a question you might be able to answer. But.
Yeah, I don't know if we will be able to answer that. We have Joanne Pulley, who is our special education director. And just for everyone else's reference, I believe you're referring to the appendix that is provided from School Services of California. Right. And that appendix is entitled Excerpts from Doing More with Less.
Yes.
So it's a lengthy list of things that any district should be looking at to increase efficiency. Yeah, I'm sorry, there are no page numbers.
Well, Ms. Harder, with regard to your question, it is not a good practice to put a range on the service page in delivering services. If we're providing 30 minutes per week, it should indicate 30 minutes per week, not 30 to 40 or 30 to 45. So we do have a practice of being very specific. Mm-hmm.
The final bullet that I had listed here, and I listed it because the board has commented on it a number of times, is student transportation. This is something we contract out. We had the experience of going to the transportation company just a couple of years ago and asking them to look at a couple of routes, and they very quickly came back and said, oh yes, we think we can do that more efficiently. Here's a savings to you, and we've rerouted students. This is not something that we watch regularly. I frankly don't have staff to look over student transportation, so we renegotiate contracts for student transportation, but it is something that we do need to look at. And finally, I'd like to turn to Ed Diaz because the proposal tonight is to ask him to establish a fiscal evaluation team to review and analyze issues that are related to the fiscal solvency of the elementary district. Ed has provided you with an attachment that includes all of the elements I just talked to you about and more. And as part of that, Ed will also talk to you about establishing a fiscal or creating a framework for the establishment of a district budget committee that would regularly study the budget. So with that, I'm proud and pleased to have Ed Diaz here in the district. Ed.
Thank you,
you're
Dr.
on.
Sarvis, Board President Cordero, and board members. First prefacing my comments, let's realize that I assumed my position on November 1st, and this document has a start date of November 5th. So what we have here, and for the public's information, are my thoughts and ideas after 4 days on the job based on my previous experience.
But you're almost done with the study, right?
These aren't policies. These aren't programs in place. These are thoughts and brainstorms. If you see in the top corner, it says V.5. This is version 5 on 11/9. Version 1 began November 5th. I provided that to the superintendent. He returned it to me. It became version 2. I've sent it on to other staff, and they've returned it to me. It becomes version 3, 4, 5. We have, this evening, we get to present this draft to the board and the public for your input. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is a draft document that is in process. It will be, I can't even give you a date when this will be completed. We have yet to hear from our principals on this. We have yet to hear from our associations on this. And we may hear from the public on this. So we want to make sure that everybody's comments are included. And I would say, however, that we will put everything down on the, in the outline. It will be up to the board to take things off of the outline. So we'll get calls that people want to add things, or they say take it off, but that will be up to the board's discretion what comes off and what the final outline looks like. Now, I won't repeat the items covered by the superintendent, but my document here is focused around 4 areas at this point: processes, personnel, spending, and facilities. That's not to mean that more won't be added, but these were the major focus areas that have been determined at this time based on the board focus goals, discussions with the superintendent and staff. And just to run through a few of them, we've spent considerable time on attendance. I think everybody has heard the importance of sound attendance accounting and procedures. The budget committee, how will it be composed? What will their duties be? What responsibilities will they have? What are the timelines? These will certainly be items for the board to consider in a study session for further discussion. None of these points will be decided by Ed. Ed is the scribe here and is offering his skills and organization, but these will take a lot of collaboration, discussion with all levels of staff throughout the district. Again, collaborate with our customers in budget information and budget creation. We've got some work to do in that area, but keep in mind we are using systems that aren't conducive to that process right now. We're using computer systems that are being upgraded, so we're moving in the right direction. But we have work to do. Balancing the budgets, rollover budgets, fiscal stewardship of categorical programs at the site. Who is responsible for the financial stewardship of categorical programs at the site? Is it the office? Is it the assistant superintendent for secondary ed? So these things have to be determined. Class sizes. What are the optimum class sizes for revenue and expenditure control? Programs, are we offering programs that are consistent with the board's goals, and are they producing the results? We have to look at all those in terms of effectiveness. Again, hourly programs, the cost effectiveness of hourly programs. I know that there's some things to look at in that area. As you can tell, each one of these items is a huge project. Each one of these could be a 10-page project in itself. We've been over the MAW program, item G, cost reductions, the consumables. I think the district's been down that path many times over the last few years, and all the low-hanging fruit has been picked. So there's to put it very simply, there aren't going to be any more low plums on the tree. You guys found that long ago, so we're going to have to become much more creative in that. Position control, I think, is always a big one. Whenever you're evaluating fiscal solvency, the bottom line is who is working on what and what funds are they being paid from. And you look at all of that, that's in the simplest context. The time reporting of hours, the control of extra duty assignments, hiring contracted services, consultants, the tracking of substitute costs and use. The third area, spending. We've all seen these before, the purchase order process, online purchasing. One of the most prevailing, I won't say problems, it's a challenge in all school districts, are inadvertent purchases, where somebody is walking through Sam's Club and they just see something they have to have and they buy it right then and there and turn in the receipt to the principal or receipt to the office and expect to be reimbursed with. No one's considered, was there a budget for it, or there wasn't a process. I call that an inadvertent purchase. There's a lot of those, not just here, everywhere. And they're a contributing factor because, for one thing, those purchases take longer administratively to enter into the system. You've got to reimburse a credit card, you have to create a purchase order after the fact. All of these things create more work. They're just elements of an inefficient system. So those things would have to be addressed. Credit cards, the same type of a thing. Child nutrition. Do we have a nutritionally sound program that's fiscally solvent? And so we're working towards that area. Again, school sites, replace lease portables with district-owned portables as our enrollment decline. It'll save our daily operating costs. Reconfigure portables at the elementaries to reduce our costs. Lease opportunities, mothballing, that's a term I use to, when Dr. Sarvis referred to unused classrooms before. I would take that one step further. I would disconnect some of the utilities to the extent possible, although you still want your alarms and you still want your basic safety systems operable, but fix the lights so they don't turn on, fix the air conditioner so that it doesn't come on, so they won't use the room. But you have your alarms will still on. Our electricians can do that, our staff can do that. And then I don't know to what extent the district has considered energy conservation options here, but there's always a lot of money in that. I'll give you an example. In the summertime, I'll bet we could drive around the district to schools that are closed and find the air conditioners on in classrooms. It happens. It happens everywhere. It's not because people are not doing their job, it's just the nature of our system. So those types of things. And then the proper use of the heating there and system. So what I'm going to do is continue along this path here, several more versions. We will be presenting this to the principals. I will be meeting with the associations to get their input. So there'll be several more drafts. Hopefully, the next version will contain some of those items with the budget committee and the fiscal solvency team. What do we want this team to look like? Who should be on the team, and what will their charge be? So, again, these are draft comments primarily by myself. So, don't anybody think that these are programs that we're implementing tomorrow, but these are considerations. The purpose of this was to identify the various elements that would be taken into consideration in a fiscal solvency study. So, are there any questions? Dr. Noel?
Yes, Dr.
Yeah, I
Noel.
wanted to ask, is there between Dr. Sarvis's memo at the very bottom and yours, is there an assumption that we're going to have a budget committee? Or is that still an
That's
open
an
question?
item, Dr. Noel, under the develop responsible fiscal processes. I would say that's an assumption that there will be one. Although its composition and duties and responsibilities, I think, have to be defined. They haven't been yet. So,
I'd like to challenge that assumption and make sure it's thoroughly debated because I see a lot of problems with that. If we're talking about board participation, you can't have more than two board members on it. If it removes budget important aspects of budget making and budget decision making from a public board meeting to a committee meeting, even though it be a Brown Act regulated committee meeting, it takes it away from the public purview in de facto, whether it, sure, people could come, but they don't. And I'm very much concerned
Well,
with
this
that.
is
I think
why-
the budget is something that
Well,
that's
that's why
utterly
this is
vital.
a draft document,
Yeah.
Dr. Noel,
Okay.
and it's precisely for that reason that it has been presented in this manner, so that we can elicit those comments and consider all of those things, because you make very valid points, exactly. So nothing has been decided, and this is certainly an item that warrants further discussion and debate by all parties.
Well, let me just interject, because I was going to comment that I was glad to see it here. I think I spoke to you about it, and I've spoken to others about, I really would like us to have a budget committee. And I think that I welcome that discussion, because I think we could really engender a much greater level of trust in the district finances if our processes were more open and had more stakeholders involved in development, et cetera. So I was happy to see this here. I just want to interject
May I
that.
comment on this as well? Because we've had some previous discussion of this. Ed's proposal to bring this to the board for board workshop and study session and have that kind of a discussion about what kind of a committee we would want if we wanted one, and what it would do and who it would be composed of is very much up for future discussion. The board will remember that we have often, well, a couple of times in the past, we've been told by various city council members that you should have a budget committee so that you can study the budget and help make some preliminary decisions. And my response to that has always been the board would not want to cede that authority to a committee, because that's very much the purview of the board's power. To my mind, this committee would not be to make budgetary decisions, but would continue to defer those to the board. However, I do want to comment on the importance of our professional associations, because the Santa Barbara Teachers Association, the California School Employees Association, and their involvement in this kind of a process where they're looking at expenses and feeling a partner in that kind of a study and seeing where cutting expenses or maximizing revenues can help the fiscal picture of the district, of course, is critical to us. We would not want to do this without our professional associations' close alliance. For us just to have
I guess I don't understand what that means by a close alliance.
Well,
I mean, that they would be on the budget committee, is that?
I would certainly
Well,
hope they
I
would be
don't-
on the budget committee.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily even talking about the budget committee, but in the study of the budget, and actually, yes, I would hope on the budget committee as well. If we were to take a careful look at the budget and take a careful look at ways that we could maximize revenue and control expenses, I think they're a critical partner in that.
So this is clearly something we want to discuss further, and I think we'll probably have an opportunity to have that discussion. At any rate, I like the idea of having it out there for discussion. And having served on budget committees for districts, I don't think, in my experience, the budget committee has never usurped any of the authority of the governing body. And I would not anticipate us creating a budget committee that would take away something we didn't want to give up. Since we're the ones creating it, we'll be the ones deciding what it can do and what it cannot do. But I think we want to have that discussion further, and so we'll bring this back at another
I'd like to
time.
have a moment just to rebut your remark right now, if I may. To me, one of the most critically important political venues in any agency is the budget and the budget process. And it's where the priorities of the district, priorities get expressed in tangible form. And there's hardly anything more important politically. Okay? And to remove it by layering it in a committee structure from full public participation and full public airing, to me would be a big mistake. And I can tell you, I for one, for example, if a budget committee were making recommendations to the board, which then a board would have a hard time justifying turning down, then I would simply go and want to be a debater at the budget committee, and the process would then simply change rooms. But to be part of that budget debate, whether it's in forming recommendations or in ultimately ratifying recommendations, that's a critical political dimension that I don't think we.
If I may,
Well,
Dr.
I'm a bit surprised to hear you say that you would have a hard time turning down recommendations. I don't think we have a hard
Well,
time
that's-
turning down recommendations at all.
That's something that is widely understood in political science, Mrs. Cordero, that when committees make recommendations to voting bodies, that it constrains politically. Okay?
Our record on the board might show differently, though.
If I may, Dr. Noel, budget recommendations to the board will always come from staff. They will never come from the committee. The committee will discuss, help identify areas to look into, but keep in mind, that's why we have a fiscal services team in the department. Ultimately, when that budget is put together, it will come to the board, as it always has. And one of the principal reasons for a budget committee in my past experiences is to help develop a deeper understanding of the budget process and the fiscal areas of the school district. I've never worked on a budget committee that made decisions and took recommendations to the board. That's not their function.
Well, that's very helpful to hear that.
So that's not their function at all. The board
So their
makes.
function is more of a educational
You want
function?
we want to hear what they have to say about how the district is spending their money. We want to show them how the district is spending the money. I want to hear ideas. I don't have all the answers to all the questions, but the rubber meets the road there with Mr. Wolf and myself and other staff when we have to sit down and start looking at the debits and the credits. That's how the budget is going to continue to be presented to the board. Now, the budget committee may help us present, let's, for instance, the board is familiar with, in a past assignment where I contributed a long laundry list of budget reductions to the board. Now, that came out of staff, out of a budget committee, but the board went down that laundry list item by item, and they decided which programs to keep, which items to cut.
Would it be a standing committee of the board, or maybe that
Well,
would help?
We have to decide. We have to talk about it.
I was going to say, I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves saying the committee will do this or will not do that, since we haven't even discussed among ourselves what we think the committee should do or shouldn't do, whether we should even have one. So I think we can't say the committee will do this or the committee will not do that. We haven't created it yet. We'll be the ones deciding what we think it should do or should not do. So, with that, let's, do we have any other questions about this report?
Well, specifically, Ed was eliciting any other ideas of things that ought to be on this list. So if you have other ideas, then please let us know.
Great, thank you. That's actually a very useful request, I think, for us to give you some feedback. And I'll request that the board members forward any suggestions to Mr. Diaz before our next meeting so that we can incorporate any of our suggestions into our next report. Thank you.
We'll be
Thank
bringing
you.
this back to you.
Thank you. We'll look forward to seeing it. Okay, that takes us back to consent agenda items that we have pulled. We pulled item D2. So let's go back to that item. Approval of additional fundraising for 2006-2007 Dos Pueblos High School and San Marcos High School. Dr. Noel, I believe you pulled this.
Well, I wanted to understand better. It says that the board approves all fundraising by schools prior to fundraising events. And I received a copy of a letter that was sent by the principal at Santa Barbara High School about fundraising, and I don't recall ever approving that. And I want, maybe that's not this may not be the right place to raise it. But
Well, I don't think that's the appropriate place for this agenda item. This is an approval of existing fundraising activities for Dos Pueblos and San Marcos.
Well, let me just comment, though. You asked me about that. I walked in, pulled the agenda, and saw it on the list that the board did approve that at a meeting.
the board did approve that $100,000 fundraising effort that Mr. Turnbull has sent out a letter to the public.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm gonna pull this back on target. We have item D2 is not about San Marcos High School. It's about San Marcos and DP, and we need to vote on this item.
Move to approve.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries 5-0. That takes us to item D13, approval of renewing the non-public school agency-related service master contract with Lindenwood Bell Learning Processes.
I had questions on that one and 14 and 15. Simply, it sets in a not to exceed a budget, but I just want to know the source of those funds.
General fund,
General fund.
General fund.
secondary.
But these are items that we have to do. Is that?
Yes, indeed they are.
I mean, it's not something we can say, oh, we don't want to spend that $60,000.
No,
or
sir.
Is it something we
well-
can say no to?
Well, sir, I would have liked to have said no, but we didn't have an option in these particular cases.
Yeah. Okay. Same thing on the other ones, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. And
So is that the same question for all three of those?
yeah, yes, it is.
13, 14, and 15?
Yes.
Okay, so can
Move
we?
to approve?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I was an
Okay, motion carries 5-0. We pulled item D 17 for a later agenda, so that takes us to item D23. Acceptance of completed contract science and library additions at Peabody Charter School.
Yes, I wanted to ask, perhaps it's Mr. Hadjunk, I'm not sure. When I look here at the fiscal impact of this, I add up the $812,500, the $250,000, the $51,007, and the $337,009, and I get $1,450,000 plus or a little maybe. And then I take the total price, $3,692,000. I come out with a difference of $2,241,000, which I presume. So you didn't say how much. This doesn't say how much was in fundraising. Was all of that raised then as fundraising? $2,200,000.
I don't know how much of the fundraising has been given to the district yet, Dr. Noel. However, I want to point out that this is on the construction portion only. There were also costs associated with non-construction as part of the total project costs. So this notice of completion is just to say that the contractor is done with his work and that we are obligated by the Public Contract Code to file this notice to set timelines in force to return the contractor's retention. As far as the total amount of the project, it is anticipated that you take the costs that I have listed, the total project costs, and that difference, I believe, is what Peabody Charter was obligated to pay with their fundraising.
Well, it's the wrong place to do this now, but I wondered if we could have a report on that, the overall picture, what the shortfall is, how much fundraising's come up with, and how much is still due.
Be happy to. We've had discussions with them. So,
Thank you very much.
Okay. Do we have a motion on this item?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
I'm sorry, who made that motion? Thank you.
Okay. That brings us back to the end of our agenda, coming events. Are there any announcements of coming events?
Well, we have meetings coming up on Friday, on Tuesday, and then a regular meeting the following Tuesday.
Yes. Okay, so we have an action-packed November.
Remember, this Friday morning meeting
Has been changed.
down at Casa Las Palmas.
Las Flores.
Las,
Isn't it Las Flores? Yeah.
oh, really?
Casa Las Flores.
Okay.
Okay.
Flowers, not trees.
Flowers, not trees.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any board comments? Nope. Okay. Any future agenda items? I think we've added a few already. Okay, then I think that brings us to the adjournment.